The best way to learn a language? Immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards for you this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. For instance, I've been using Babbel's convenient courses to help me learn basic conversational skills in German while I'm getting ready for a little trip I'm planning. It's not a language I'd ever studied before, but I find the lessons really easy and kind of like hand-holding me through learning a completely new language to me. And it's reassuring to know that with the help of Babbel, I'll be able to greet people, order food, and ask for directions without having to consult language apps while I'm in Deutschland. I'm still learning. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/vulgar. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/vulgar, spelled BABBEL.com/vulgar. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, a co-founder of the Go Kid Go network. At Go Kid Go, putting kids first is at the heart of every show that we produce. That's why we're so excited to introduce a brand new show to our network called The Search for the Silver Lining, a fantasy adventure series about a spirited young girl named Isla who time travels to the mythical land of Camelot. During her journey, Isla meets new friends, including King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, and learns valuable life lessons with every quest, sword fight, and dragon ride. Positive and uplifting stories remind us all about the importance of kindness, friendship, honesty, and positivity. Join me and an all-star cast of actors including Liam Neeson, Emily Blunt, Kristen Bell, Chris Hemsworth, among many others, in welcoming the Search for the Silver Lining podcast to the Go Kid Go network by listening today. Look for the Search for the Silver Lining on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Vulgar History, a feminist women's history comedy podcast. This is There's Something About Mary Queen of Scots, part 10, and I have two special guests with me. First of all, it's a person who's been here for more than half of this 10-part series within a series. Allison Epstein, welcome.
Hello, I'm not a surprise anymore. I'm just here, happy to be here.
You're just kind of always here, but also who's like giggle. It's the person who hasn't been on any of the Mary specific episodes, but she was on Catherine de Medici. She's on Marie de Guise. She is Lana Wood Johnson.
Hello, I am not Allison Epstein.
I'm picturing, okay, so Lana, because you haven't been here for the Mary specific episodes, could you explain your personal knowledge of / connection to the story of Mary Queen of Scots so everybody knows?
Well, I'm not related to Mary Queen of Scots, no matter what my relatives will tell you. I am in fact related to Kenneth MacAlpine, the very first King of Scotland, which was a misunderstanding. That was one of your first corrections, is that there was a King of Scotland before Robert the Bruce. There was absolutely King of Scotland before Robert the Bruce. I am descended of him. I share his bloodline. But I was talking about that line of descent. Just wanted to clarify that. Also, because my relatives were all convinced that I was related to Mary Queen of Scots, I became obsessed with her in 7th grade and read the Antonia Fraser version of the biography and have been following all of the updates and discoveries and historical changes since then. So she's one of my people. And I've been spoilering Anne before. Anne's like, but Mary's so boring. It's like, oh, no. So I've been watching that friend that makes you read their favorite book, this whole thing going, yep, nope, she's getting a good part now. the whole time. It's been very fun.
I will say I never thought Mary Queen of Scots was boring. I just thought I didn't know as much about her time in England as I do now. And I was like, Lana, is this, I don't know how to talk about it. It's like, oh, 6 hours later. Like, yeah, there's stuff to talk about in that part.
Let's get into the plots, though. It's time.
It'll be like half an episode at most. It'll be so boring. And then how will I do it? How do I do it? Like, no. You wait.
No, Lana, I picture, do you know that meme template of the little creepy guy at the window and he's like, heh, yes. That's how I picture you listening to me doing these episodes because you're like, yes, Anne understands now. Yes. Now she's getting it. Yes. Yeah. So
I believe I specifically said, wait till you get to the Douglases. At one point, you're like, who? I'm like, okay. We're in for a ride.
And now Anne and I, every time we see each other, are just like, a Douglas.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is widespread. I've heard from people in the Tits Out Brigade. One of them has the last name Douglas. So that's exciting to me. One of them works with somebody called Douglas and they, in their head, can't stop thinking that. And I'm just like, yes, that's me at the window. Yes. And Allison, can you share what you, the phrase that is stuck in your head now, please? When you take your pills every day?
Oh, every morning when I take my pills, there's Anne's voice in the back of my head that just goes, Herman, my pills. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I'm in everyone's brain now. And my own all the time. I was looking up just for this. I was looking at the Douglas family Wikipedia page and it says like motto, a Douglas. And I'm like, yeah, it is. I know that. Okay, so I do want to just let everybody know as well. So today we're going to be talking about the legacy of Mary Queen of Scots. And we're going to also be doing her scandalicious score because, again, Lana just smiles and nods and laughs because I actually found my original notes, like handwritten notes that were like, episode 4, her time in England plus scoring. Like I thought that was going to be a cool 45-minute episode. But in fact, Allison and I spent 2.5 hours ending with her execution, didn't get into anything else. And yeah. But yeah, I want the listeners to know that we're doing this episode. And then this is not the end of the season because there's something about Mary Queen of Scots. So this has been her story, which has been 10 parts. But then we're also going to be doing some more episodes, by we, I mean me, about some other people from the story who we want to talk about more. So there's going to be a Bess of Hardwick episode. There's going to be a For Marys episode. And we're going to be talking about Elizabeth of Valois. So the season continues. So keep checking your app.
I'm entirely here for the Elizabeth episode.
Yeah. And there's also, I've got some piping hot news. This is wild to me. So I don't know, it was maybe a year ago. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do Mary Queen of Scots. That'll be my next season. And then first the ciphered letters were uncovered. I was like, oh, this is very timely, making my podcast more up to date than any current biography of her. And then more information just came out about these Elizabeth I papers, which I'll talk to you about when we get to why we're talking about that. So picking up where we left off last time, and Allison and Lana, as you know, and just so the listeners know, this is what I want from them. Please interrupt me constantly.
I'm not sure if the three of us have ever been on the main podcast together, but if you are not a Patreon and are not familiar with the vibe of a Vulgar Piece Theater episode, this is what it is. So consider that your ad for the Patreon.
Yeah, absolutely. So we stopped. Mary, Queen of Scots, died. She was executed. And then Elizabeth died several years later. She died in 1603. And she named Mary's son James the First. Okay. James became James the First of England. This is why he's James the First/6th, which is the thing that annoys me to have to say and to write. But it's true because he was the 6th King James of Scotland, but he's the 1st King James of England. And after him, you don't have to do that. Like his son becomes James II because he's the King of England/Scotland. So that's why he has 2 different things. And so what was just recently discovered. So the British Library used a new technique to uncover passages of Camden's Annals, the first official account of Elizabeth's reign. This news just came out 2 days ago from the time we're recording this. So what this is so William Camden wrote a record of Elizabeth's reign, but he wrote it during the reign of James. But what they just figured out is like he wrote it, and then James was like, could you please annotate it to make me sound better and to make this all sound less messy. Thank you.
Darnley's son to the end, I tell you what.
Oh,
He is a messy queer, and we love to hate him.
We do.
Darnley, we don't love to hate. Darnley, I think we just straight up hate. James has like that 1% of Mary. Ugh.
Yeah.
So what happened is Darnley Jr., aka James the First and Sixth. So he was like, could you please rewrite this thing? And what's just happened is so the state-of-the-art imaging technology, they basically, as far as I understand, X-rayed, and they were able to see what was crossed off and what was written on these things before.
This is news to me, and that was a real gasp because I'm excited now. What you are saying to me is that you were uncovering the mess through X-rays, and I'm very excited.
No, like this news just came out. I think like a couple of people from the Tits Up Brigade sent me this like link, and I was like, oh, I think Emily was the first person to send it. So shout out to Emily. But I was just like, wait, what? I'm just like, damn it. Like, luckily, this came out just before we recorded. But I was like, I hope that there's not any more significant paperwork discovered between us recording this and this episode coming out, because I want to have the latest information. So anyway, what's important to us in this discussion right now is that for 400 years, people have believed what this said in the Camden's Annals, that Elizabeth, upon her deathbed, was like, James is my heir. But what this reveals is, in fact, that upon her deathbed, analysis of the manuscript drafts shows that the deathbed scene was a fabricated addition that Camden did not intend originally to put into his history. He presumably included it to appease James so that his succession looked more predetermined than it had actually been. Elizabeth was too ill to speak in her final hours, and no other historical evidence points to this deathbed scene being true. So
that is
the most
huge
James thing ever.
Like, and the most James thing I've ever heard. It's incredible.
But what if you said that she said that I was going to be king? Because that sounds more right.
That sounds historically correct. Yes.
It's great. There's there's this one article from The Guardian is what I read about it, and that was most pertinent to this conversation. But I know that some of the phrasing about when Elizabeth was excommunicated by the Pope was also kind of like softened to make it sound less bad. Anyway, so that's my exciting news. You know, a week ago, maybe I would have said, yeah, so then on her deathbed, Elizabeth said James was my heir. No. On the deathbed, James was like, I'm just going to be the heir. And let's go.
Fight me.
And look at us now.
I'm heir, fight me.
So ultimately, in whatever underhanded or legitimate way it happened, James, Mary's son, became the King of England also. And then this setup, so all British monarchs since James and through to today's monarch, Charles III, have been descended from Mary Queen of Scots and Darnley. So this is where the lineage, like it's moved back and forth, which we're not going to get into today because we have enough to talk about.
We cannot make this 3 hours. As soon as we tell Lana to talk about the Hanovers, we're going to be the rest of the day.
We're not going to. We're not getting into
Hanovers.
No, we're not getting into Germany. No. But basically, this is the lineage. But actually, Lana, can you talk about this? So this is part of what is weird and interesting about the legacy of Mary Queen of Scots, is that Elizabeth famously died unmarried with no children. Mary died with a son who became the next monarch, and that's where the lineage comes from. So it's kind of like the two of them are like co-ancestors. It's like Elizabeth is this like idealized queen, but Mary is the actual ancestor. So can you explain just that mess?
How the Victorians made you think that this was the most boring story anybody's ever heard in your entire life?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, oh gosh. So James manages to have 4 kids. They're all four kings in a row that descend from him directly. And like father to son, father to son. They're all the messiest bitches you've ever met. And they like to the point where that's where we get pilgrims from. And like all of our Cromwell mess. So there's like ruining everything. Charles II gets deposed, basically. Oh gosh, I can never remember.
No, Charles I.
Charles I got deposed. James. So James II dies. Did he die? Yeah, you should have prepared me for this because now I can't remember. He died.
Oh, I'm sorry. You don't need to get into the details of it.
Like
James II died, and then it was his daughters, and then it was his daughters. It was Mary, and then Anne came from James II. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the daughters, and then they run out of kids, and then they have to go back to the other line and find some Germans to bring in. But eventually, the way it all works out is that the only people that are actually genuinely descended from Charles II that are in the royal family at this point are William and Harry and Camilla.
Yeah.
And the Victorians like get to this point where they're rewriting history, much like the French were rewriting the Valois history and the Bourbons and all that. So like they have the Bourbons, but they want to vilify the Valois. Well, the English like can't vilify Mary Queen of Scots because she is the direct ancestor of all of the current line of kings, but Elizabeth is the hero. So they make Elizabeth the hero and they water down Mary. So she's like, well, she was really a victim of all of these terrible people and she never really did anything and then she just died and Elizabeth had to. They like these bad guys forced her hand and it was just a tragedy. Mary Queen of Scots is just a tragedy. It's like no, we'll talk about that part though, but like they basically rewrote it.
No, and this is where a lot of those, the artwork comes from. And I've shared a lot of them on the Instagram over these past couple months. In the 19th century, in the Victorian era, Mary Queen of Scots was a popular subject of paintings. And it's always her kind of swooning. It's like her swooning as Rizzio is being murdered. It's her swooning as she's escaping Lochleven. It's like her just being this like, oh, poor me, the cruel hand of fate is doing all these things to me, is the vibe. And I think I'm going to guess part of it is because Victoria is the queen and the last long-lasting queen regnant in England was Elizabeth. So she wants to connect herself to Elizabeth and be like her, I'm going to be a good queen. But Elizabeth did this thing where she killed Victoria's actual ancestor. So there's this weird... Anyway, what you just said, Lana, is exactly what I've heard from a couple people. Sorry, I just want to finish this thought.
You're right.
Before I forget it. I've heard from a couple people who are from Britain, I think people from England, who have said like they took their, what is it, the GCSEs, like the test, the exams you take over there. And they're like, what? And their impression is like adult people who like studied her in school was that Mary Queen of Scots was just kind of this flighty person who got put in jail and then got sort of tricked into doing a treason. So it's like that narrative is still very pervasive, like at least in the school system in at least England. So yeah, that's what a lot of people have been telling me. They're like, oh, I didn't know. I thought she was just this kind of like passionate, person who just like fell for the wrong guy. And I'm like, that's what I've just spent 16 hours debunking. So I'm glad there's a little army of people now who know the truth.
Well, and Victoria herself really wanted to be this dainty lady who didn't do much. She wanted this ideal of feminism, which is not true about her as a human being, but she connected herself back to Mary and made Mary this ideal version of femininity, that she was then this tragic queen sort of, and that's who Victoria identified with. She wasn't going to be this hard ass Elizabeth. She was going to be more like Mary. And so
Victoria fucked.
Victoria had a sex addiction.
That's what I have to contribute to this conversation. Is Queen Victoria was horny as shit, and so Elizabeth I was not a great role model for Victoria.
Whereas Mary had 3 husbands, and she fell in love a lot, and so she could identify what she took the parts of Mary that she wanted, and she took the parts of Elizabeth she wanted, and then made everybody fall in line with that.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is that like Mary was like a wife and a mother, right? And that was Victoria's kind of like, this is what all women should be like, so that we should idealize her. It's like, oh, but she was executed for treason. So it's like, but asterisk. She
never raised her child.
Victim of fate.
Yep.
She was barely a wife and barely a mother, but she was a wife and a mother, technically.
Yeah, technically, more so than Elizabeth. So yeah, and we're going to talk about the weird ways that their legacy is different time. But thank you, Lana, because that's a weird part of it. Okay, so I'm going to wait. And actually, it starts getting weird in terms of the tomb. So I got some information from an article on Royal Central website. This is an article by Elizabeth Jane Timms. So 3 years after James became king of England also, he commissioned a marble tomb for his mother. So she had been buried in Peterborough Abbey, which was the abbey where like Catherine of Aragon was buried. It's just kind of like the place where we put the queens who we want to like pretend like, don't worry about it. But James is like, this is literally my mother. So I don't know how I don't know. I have a guess. I have an assumption, but I don't know how much of this was him just being like, I need to quash any worries that people have that like my mother, that I'm illegitimate, that I shouldn't be the king. Like we can't treat my mother like this second class queen. We have to be like, oh, so already it's just kind of like, oh, this poor victim of fate, Mary Queen of Scots. But he wanted her to be treated with the honors of a queen because it's his mom, even though he like didn't see her for all of his life.
Or was ever nice to her.
Or yeah.
But like when it's useful for him, he's
Yeah.
going to be a good son.
Exactly. Well, he just kind of needed to do this. And Mary would have appreciated it because she didn't realize he was a piece of shit. So until the end, when she did realize this,
She'd been like, oh, he loves me.
well, she was like, when he becomes an adult, he's going to come rescue me. And then he was just like, no, I'm not. And that was pretty upsetting for her.
And Darnley from beyond is standing at the window like, hey.
Yes. So it took about 6 years for this marble tomb to be created, and it's there. So it's in Westminster Abbey. So her body was exhumed from Peterborough Abbey and moved to Westminster Abbey. Today, a flag of Scotland hangs in Peterborough Cathedral to mark the former location of Mary's tomb. So where her tomb is, so it's in the southern end of what's called the Henry VII Chapel. It's right opposite Elizabeth's tomb. So
I love it so much. It's so fucking petty.
This is the closest that these two women ever were. All that Mary wanted for so long was to meet Elizabeth, and only in death were they ever in the same room. Actually, I saw a thing that said the closest they ever were in life was like there was one point where Elizabeth was like en route from one place to another place, and Mary was staying in one of Bess of Hardwick's homes kind of nearby. So it's like they were within a mile of each other for these 5 minutes. Anyway, yeah, so Mary Queen of Scots is opposite Elizabeth's tomb. So Elizabeth's tomb was also erected at the order of James I/6th. And so Elizabeth's tomb is shared with Mary I, but it sounds like her tomb is very much just like Elizabeth. And then it's like in small font, like, and also Mary, because no one really wanted to remember her.
I love that because you know Elizabeth's ghost is so fucking stressed out all the time. She's just like, okay, the two people who hated me the most are either right across from me or in my tomb with me. And this is not cool. And William Cecil, wherever he's buried, is just like, the fuck is going on?
So Mary's tomb, again, if people, I love this. I've said a couple times on the podcast, I love it when people travel to sites I talk about and send me pictures of them. So if anyone, next time someone's in Westminster Abbey, like please take a picture because I'm curious. So apparently Mary's tomb is much taller and more magnificent than Elizabeth's. She's also, this is just like in terms of like, and we're going to talk about where is Mary Queen of Scots' ghost because it's in a lot of places. But let's say if her ghost is there, she's also hanging out with her mother-in-law, Margaret Douglas.
Or Douglas.
Douglas is Darnley's mom, is in that same like area. And apparently on Margaret Douglas's tomb, there's a small figure of Darnley kneeling is like incorporated on Margaret Douglas's tomb.
I thought you were going to say there's a tiny baby James that just says, avenge my cause, oh Lord.
That would be keeping with everything. No, but it's a little tiny Darnley. Little Darnley action figure is on there. Anyway, the other important tomb in this south part of this aisle is Lady Margaret Beaufort. So she is the ancestor of all of the Tudors. She was the mother of Henry VII. So it's kind of like James. I'm not sure if James put her there or if he was just like, that's where she is. Let's put Mary there. So it's just kind of like underlining the fact that like Mary is descended from the Tudors. Like that makes me, James, a legitimate king. Look, behold, all the tombs together, like all these ladies, like.
This is my proof.
Yeah. So on Mary's tomb, it's one of those tombs that's like, it kind of looks like a big marble coffin with her lying on top of it. So there's a likeness of her, which looks a lot like the later portraits of her. It was probably based off of her death mask, which was the thing. Like when people were beheaded, they would like make a little, I don't know, plaster or whatever. They would make a copy of what the person's face looked like. So it looks a lot like her. She's wearing a fabulous outfit, which, you know what? Good, because that's part of what she's known for. She's wearing a ruff. Her hair is styled. I don't know if Mary Seton was around to consult to be like, this is the marble wig I would like her to be wearing. Thank you. She's wearing a long cloak fastened by a brooch. The Lion of Scotland is at her feet. So it's very much just like, here lies a queen is the vibe of it all. Like James is just being like, she was a queen, not a traitor, which makes me cool. Don't worry about it. So there is a Latin inscription on it. And this is where I was just like, had to do a little bit of digging around because so much of this writing is just like written by the Earl of Northampton. And I'm like, who the fuck is that? Like, use people's names, please. So the Latin inscription was written by Henry Howard, the first Earl of Northampton. So he is the brother of T-Dog, who we remember, Lana, I don't know if you've heard that episode yet, but that's the guy who wanted to marry Mary and then he was executed. He was in charge of her trial. Thomas Howard, I assume was his name. That's why I call him T-Dog. Anyway, Henry Howard is also the great uncle of Tits Out Francis Howard. So just whenever I see about a Howard, I'm like, what's the relation to Francis? So at the time that this tomb was being made, the murder plot had not happened, but the murder plot happened just 2 years after this tomb went up. So she's like already, I think, married to that guy. Anyway, so the inscription, which is in Latin, it speaks about Mary's heroism. It skips over the events leading to her death. And in part, in translation, it says, great in marriage, greater still in lineage. Oh, yeah, great in marriage to Darnley.
I'm sorry, that's so funny.
Great in marriage.
She had the worst 3 marriages of any human being I've ever met.
Great in marriage, greater still in lineage.
Okay, James, who had that inscription commissioned.
Greatest of all in her progeny.
Oh my God.
Narcissist gonna narcissist.
Yeah. Yeah. Here lies buried the daughter, bride, and mother of kings.
God, I'm so fucking mad.
This is like real Fredegund, wife and mother energy in this. Yeah.
This is even more aggressive. Like, calm his tits, because, like, what the fuck?
And then it says, God grant that her sons and all who are descended from her may hereafter behold the cloudless days of eternity.
Why did he write sons? He knows he's the only son.
He's going to have sons, and those sons are going to be important and not fuck everything up. It will be great.
Lord.
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah. Here's the thing. It's like Mary and Darnley, like, first of all, Darnley, piece of shit, but also Mary and Darnley, cousins. So it's like they're like, of course there's a bunch of fucked up people coming after that. Like, it's just the mixture of just like Darnley's personality with the like inbreeding aspects. It's like, yeah, of course they're all assholes.
Can you
Which is what
imagine
Victoria
if
liked about her?
Francis had lived, how cute their kid would have been? This is what I think about.
Her and
like, after
Francis?
watching Brain. Yeah,
Hmm.
they would have had a great kid. They would have raised him well and would have been a schemy little bitch. And like, that's what the world needs.
All
Yeah.
of French history would be entirely different.
All of English history would be completely different. America might not exist. Who's to say?
We're going to talk about all of this when we get into the legacy and significance, the sliding doors of it all. Anyway, and then this is what I find, I don't know, it's generally described as being like, isn't this nice? And I'm like, oh, this is real fucked up. So let me know what you think when I explain to you. So Elizabeth is buried with her sister, Mary. So in 1867, so basically nobody knew where James's tomb was, or like they knew where his tomb was. They just didn't know where his body was buried. And in 1867, for some reason, some people cared. And so they were exhuming the bodies from this area to try and find James. And they thought maybe his body was put with that of his mother. And so they opened up her grave, and then they found that she was buried along with a bunch of her descendants who were children who died. So she's buried with James's eldest son, Henry, who died as a teenager. She's buried alongside Anne Hyde, who is the first wife of her great-grandson, James II. James is her granddaughter, Elizabeth, Queen of Bohemia, and her son, Prince Rupert of the Rhine, are buried there, as well as numerous children of James II who died in infancy, as well as all of the dead children of Queen Anne I.
How big is this tomb?
They're all there, just hanging out.
This is a real, like, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, like, the 4 grandparents in the bed situation. Like, this is not there's not enough room for this.
So the way that this is described often is that, Elizabeth is like barren, spinster, alone. But then Mary Queen of Scots, it's like mother of kings, buried with all of her grandchildren and her great grandchildren. Like, look at her being this like traditional feminine figure of like wife and mother. And that's how it's been described. But I see it more just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, this is fucked up. This is weird.
Can't throw them out. They can't. They're not worthy of their own tomb, so you got to put them somewhere. Westminster's not a big place.
Yeah, it makes more sense to put them with Mary than to put them with Elizabeth, I guess. But this has been described in numerous things I've looked at as being like, in death, Mary was comforted with the like bodies of her various dead child descendants.
Well, I suspect that was not a comfort for several reasons.
Can't I just be alone and important?
Here's a dead baby. Do you feel better now, Mary? Like, what the fuck?
Here, I'm going to read this. This is sort of typical of how this is written. So this is from Elizabeth Jane Timms's post, which thank you, Elizabeth Jane Timms. She really got into detail about all the tombs in her post on Royal Central. Mary Queen of Scots does not lie alone. Mary shares her last resting place with some of those who descended from her. For Mary, even in the grave, proves herself the matriarch of the burgeoning Stuart dynasty, in contrast to Elizabeth, the childless and last Tudor monarch. So, like, it's a contest sort of thing.
I do love that James was buried in a lead tomb. Like, they had to protect us from him.
Did they ever find him?
I think they did. Yeah. He was subsequently located in the vault with Henry VII and Elizabeth of York.
Okay, sure.
So, which is interesting too, that they were like, he probably said, this is where I want to be, to just be like, I'm legitimate. Look, I'm with Henry VII, like the first Tudor. Like it's
I'm the most Tudor who ever tutored.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, and then the other thing I wanted to mention is that Mary had, like, we know from this letter that she wanted to be buried in France. Reasonable. That was like the happiest, least stressful time of her life. But she was not buried in France, which worked out maybe well because all of the royal tombs were ransacked during the French Revolution. So had she been buried in France, there probably wouldn't be a tomb to speak of. But because she was buried in England, there is. But then an irony is that, like, a lot of Mary's problems technically started when her Diggy's uncles convinced her to add the Royal Arms of England to her coat of arms. Remember Cecil? Like,
Convinced.
yeah. Did you not do this when you were 14? And she's like, are you still talking about that? Oh my God. Anyway, that was one of the things that led to Cecil hating her and stuff. But now she's buried alongside the kings and queens of England. So it's just, that's irony, I think. And now we're moving on to the ghosts of Mary Queen of Scots. So first of all, I want to say my own personal experience with the ghost of Mary Queen of Scots, which is that I ordered a book 2 months ago from a used bookstore online that was like Mary Queen of Scots and all of her ghosts, and it still hasn't arrived. So I feel like the ghost. So then I was like, this doesn't arrive. So then, like a month ago, I ordered a second copy of it. Also, still hasn't arrived. So I'm just like, Mary Queen of Scots' ghost doesn't want me to read this book about her ghosts. That's my personal story. But luckily, I found this website, Spooky Scotland, which I will just quickly go through all of the places where Mary Queen of Scots' ghosts is, which, as the guy who wrote this says, scarcely a castle or stately house in Scotland which is not said to be haunted by Mary Queen of Scots. True.
I'm very excited to get to my favorite Mary Queen of Scots ghost, and I will alert the listeners when we reach it.
But in the defense of every stately home and manor in England and Scotland, Mary Queen of Scots moved around a lot, and she probably did sleep in. Like, when she was Queen of Scotland, she did these summer progresses where she went all over the country. Like, when she's in England, goodness knows she's going house to house, both on the run and when she was living with Bess of Hardwick. Like, she does have legitimate connections to a lot of houses. And she moved around enough that I think anyone could be like, oh yeah, she slept here once. And it's like, great, get your bag. Like, get those tourists in. There was that one rumor about, like, apparently she lost her shawl on this cliff, and that's why this cliff is now called the Shawl. Like, people are just like, this is a way to get people to care about our little corner of this country. So
yeah, now Scotland likes her.
Yes. And actually, So when we get to the scoring, I messaged Jennifer Morag Henderson, who's the author of the Jean Gordon / Mary Queen of Scots biography that I used as a major source, because she's a Scottish person who has written about Mary Queen of Scots, to get her take on all the 4 categories, especially legacy, because I was curious, what do people in Scotland think? So I'll let you know her thoughts then. Okay, so Stirling Castle. So this is the castle where every time Mary, as a child, people were trying to kidnap her. And then when James, people were trying to kidnap him as a baby, this is where they would go because it's kind of like a fortress.
The anti-baby kidnapping castle, if you will.
Yeah, this is and no baby was ever kidnapped from this castle. So a ghost seen at this castle is called the Pink Lady, which is the phantom of a beautiful girl wearing a pink silk gown. And I'm going to say, if Mary Queen of Scots' ghost was around, it would be wearing black and white is what it would be wearing. It would not be wearing pink.
Pink is not her color. Not with that hair.
So another apparition called the Green Lady in the same house, so 2 color-coded ghosts, is said to be a servant who rescued her mistress, Mary Queen of Scots, after a bedside candle set fire to her sheets, which is a thing I mentioned in that episode because it reminded me of Clarissa from Rain, the kind of ghostly girl who helped Mary out in various ways. So I like the fact that maybe the ghost of a person who helped Mary is haunting there. That I can believe. The Green Lady. Hermitage Castle. Okay, so this is where she was only briefly at Hermitage Castle. So this is a place where, if you will recall, before Mary married Bothwell, before we knew what a piece of shit he was stabbed in the face by a person called Jack O' the Park. And Mary went to his side, and people were like, oh, that means they were lovers or whatever. It didn't. But anyway, this is where Bothwell went to recover. So Mary went to visit him there. So apparently her ghost is haunting there. Why? That's a pretty random thing. I'm not here debunking any of these.
You think Bothwell would haunt that place?
I'm pretty sure Bothwell haunts the Danish dungeon where...
The entire country of Denmark, probably. Fuck you in particular, Denmark is what
it was actually his ghost that Hamlet saw?
Yeah. Although I don't want to discount that you would think Bothwell would haunt there too, because like apparently Mary is haunting 17 different places. Bothwell can haunt. Anyone can haunt as many places as they want. That's how this is going. Okay, so then Doon Castle. Mary stayed there in several occasions. It was held, I think, just when she was traveling around. I'm not sure. Anyway, but Doon was held by forces loyal to Mary. During the brief civil war which followed her forced abdication, apparitions of Mary have been seen there. I don't know. I think there's other places that Mary, if she was a ghost and she's going to choose where to haunt, like these are some really tenuous places. Like I think she'd go to somewhere that was more meaningful to her in some way. Okay, Houndwood House. So the ghostly horses at Houndwood House. So this is like Mary.
I love a ghost horse. Absolutely.
Okay, Mary was said to have visited Houndwood House in the Scottish borders. So already it's pretty... One of her rings was found in the house grounds. So that's why they think she was there, which could be proof, or could someone stole her ring. Like God knows all of her jewelry was looted several times when she was in prison. Anyway, the sounds of ghostly horses herald the Phantom Mary's arrival. I like that one.
I love that it's not even her ghost. It's just the ghost of the horses that she had one time.
Yep.
Amazing.
Okay, so one of Mary's favorite places she went when she was alive was Falkland Palace, which has a vast estate. She could do her favorite hobbies of falconry and hunting. This place has the oldest surviving tennis court in the world. We know she was athletic. Anyway, so people say that her spirit maybe goes to Falkland Palace, but her apparition is most likely to appear, conveniently, for the owners of the Covenanter Hotel in Falkland. So there's a hotel that's next to this palace, and apparently her ghost stays in the hotel.
In the most expensive room.
Yeah.
Really convenient.
Yeah. So anyway, this hotel was not built until 1771. So generously, this person who wrote this haunted Scotland. So it said, perhaps another building stood there when Mary was alive.
That's giving them a lot of credit.
It was where she was falconrying.
Yeah. She caught well, then I would think it would be the ghost of the falcon. I would love if there was a ghost of Mary doing falconry, riding a horse, just like being active like she liked to be.
I want more pet hauntings.
Agree.
I agree as well, but also like if and when I go to the United Kingdom, I do want to stay in this hotel. and see if I can
Is it close to where Darnley's buried? Because then we could make it a party.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, our the first stop of any trip is going to be to spit on Darnley's grave. That's what we've all agreed upon, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then Borthwick Castle. This is located near Edinburgh. So this is where she took refuge when she was on the run with Bothwell. Men started the castle. This is where she went out and she screamed at them, and they were all like, oh, Herman, my pills, because she was swearing. Anyway, she had to sneak out of a window dressed as a page boy. Allison, is this?
Is this the place where Mary haunts because she wore pants here one time and now her ghost shows up in pants? Yes, this is my favorite ghost because we love it. She's like, remember how good I looked in those pants? I want to haunt that castle.
I'd be the opposite. I'd be haunting the one place I wore a dress.
Remember when I really looked great? Let's go there.
Yeah, remember that like extremely traumatizing time I had to like dress as a boy, climb out a window and be lowered on a rope directly onto a horse to run away and ride a horse for 5 hours? I look good in those pants. Let's haunt there. So that's Borthwick Castle, everyone. Lochleven Castle. This makes sense to me. This is where she went.
I would haunt Lochleven Castle
for a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her spirit is said to have lingered long after this great escape. Although I would say she escaped. If I was Mary's ghost, I wouldn't want to go back there, a place where I was imprisoned. I would want to, unless you were like trapped. It's like she didn't die there. This is what's so interesting. It's like, why would her ghost be in all these places that are the place
Maybe
where
she looked really, really good in her washerwoman outfit and she wanted to wear that again.
It's true. It's true. She had a lot of outfit.
You don't know how ghosts work. Ghosts could be anything.
I don't. It's true. Like Mary, in life, like how many times in the story was it like she met somebody who was her enemy and suddenly they like became her biggest fan because her charisma was so strong. Like when you have that star power, then in death.
She was shedding it.
Yeah. Yeah. You just leave, you leave sort of an avatar. Okay. So after she escaped Lochleven, she sought refuge at Craignithan Castle near Lanark. I honestly do appreciate after every episode, people from England and or Scotland correct my pronunciation and thank you. But they also all say, we agree that the spellings are weird. So
my ancestors are from Lanark.
Are they?
Yeah.
Lana Wood Johnson?
No. That is not how that came to be.
Okay. Yeah, so her ghost was there as well. Apparently, she stayed there overnight before some battle. Okay, the Battle of Langside. Truly don't remember which one that was, but I really did skip over a lot of battles in my retelling. Anyway, but apparently her headless ghost began appearing there after their execution.
That's a random place to go back to.
I feel like maybe her headless ghost was confused because of no head. No head. No head. No head.
No sense of direction.
She thought she was going somewhere else and she wound up over in Lana's family's ancestral lands. This next section of the website says, Mary Queen of Scots haunts a series of English castles. So, which she does, because she's also there. So apparently she haunts Carlisle Castle and Bolton Castle, where she's said to haunt the courtyard. At Napa Hall, her ghost is allegedly wearing a black velvet dress, which is, that's how you know it's her ghost, because she wore a lot of black velvet. In the 1930s, her ghost was reported to have seen walking through the walls of Turret House of the Earl's Manor Lodge in Sheffield. Sheffield is where she stayed for a long time. That's where Allison's book partially takes place, right? Sheffield?
It is. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so she was executed at Fotheringay Castle in an indoor execution, which still blows my mind. Just feels like it would be so messy, but whatever. So Fotheringay Castle no longer exists. It was, in fact, demolished after James became king, not because his mother was killed there, but because it fell into such disrepair it had to be taken down. And all the stones were taken to be used in other buildings. But local legend, perhaps created by a nearby Talbot Hotel, is that the staircase. So, because the stones and parts of the castle were used to make other buildings. So the Talbot Hotel claims that the stones from the castle and the staircase, the oak staircase, which she walked down to face her execution, were then used to build this hotel. And her apparition is said to be a regular guest on these stairs.
She's haunting the floorboards, not the land, not the place, not the house, but that specific fucking piece of wood that I stepped on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna haunt that wood.
Because she moved around a lot, she was very into the hospitality industry and is trying to support them, okay?
I mean, again, like, do I want to stay at this hotel? Hell yes. But also, of all of these ghostly apparitions, like the one that makes the most sense to me, well, not that the stairs were moved to a hotel and she and her ghost followed the stairs, but I could see like the ghost of a person who's executed would haunt just going, going up those stairs, like reenacting their death. That sounds like a ghost thing to me that would happen. But the fact that she followed the stairs over to the hotel is like, sure, Jen.
It's cute. It's a cute hotel. It's probably worth staying in.
Oh, 100%. If and when I'm able to go to visit England and Scotland, like I want to stay in all of these hotels where Mary's ghost is.
Oh yeah, we're making fun of this, and also I completely believe every single one of these stories, and would like to stay at all these places.
I would like to go to all these places. I love ghosts. I love ghost stories. I love to stay in haunted hotels. Anyway. So those are her ghosts. So, and then sorry, that's not all her ghosts. Linlithgow Palace. So this is where she was born. Oh, okay. So again, I have to quote this website. Perhaps surprisingly, there is one historic building in Scotland that is notable by its lack of a ghost of Mary Queen of Scots. Her birthplace, Linlithgow Palace, does have the ghost of her mother, Marie of Guise.
I want to go there.
Yeah. And her grandmother, Margaret Tudor, apparently both haunt there. Yeah. That would be a cool ghost to see. And then at Holyrood Palace, which is where Davy Rizzio was murdered. And so we understand that maybe his ghost is said to walk its halls. As we mentioned in the episode, the, quote, bloodstain remains on the wooden floor where he was murdered outside Mary's private quarters. According to palace staff, these floorboards have been replaced several times, but the bloodstains always reappear in the same place, which is like tourism industry, sure. A ghostly figure has been seen in this area and unexplained noises heard at night. Meanwhile, wailing can sometimes be heard from the basement of Holyrood. This is thought to be the ghost of Agnes Sampson, who was brutally tortured under the instruction of James I/6 during the Scottish witch trials. And that's a ghost I can believe that's a location that makes sense, that a ghost would be a place where something like that happened.
Classic ghosting right there.
Yeah. So these are the ghosts. And then I just wanted to, I'm not going to list everything because there's way too many, but this is like just for a fraction of the cultural depictions of Mary Queen of Scots. So, okay. So Thomas Edison, like piece of shit, Thomas Edison, which is a topic for another day. Anyway, but he was one of the first people who made movies. And so in 1895, he made a movie called The Execution of Mary Stuart. This is the first appearance of Mary on film. It depicts her beheading. It's one of the first films to utilize an intentional jump cut to create the illusion of a single shot. So one of the first ever movies was about her beheading. 1936, Katharine Hepburn played Mary in Mary of Scotland. 1971, Vanessa Redgrave played her in Mary Queen of Scots. In Elizabeth the Golden Age, Samantha Morton plays Mary. Opposite Kate Blanchett is Elizabeth. And then 2018, there's the Mary Queen of Scots film starring Saoirse Ronan. There is lots of books. It's interesting how early these started. So there's a book called The Princess of Cleves, which is a novel by Madame de Lafayette, which it takes place in France. So Mary is a character in this book as the young wife of the Dauphin. That's from 1678. So that's 100-ish years after she died. Sir Walter Scott wrote a book called The Abbot, which covers the period of her confinement in Lochleven Castle. Alexandra Dumas Père, who wrote a book about every woman in French history, wrote a book called Mary Stuart. I like this one. In 1939, Allison Utley wrote a children's book called A Traveler in Time, which is about a young girl who finds herself back in time and in the company of Anthony Babington.
That's for me. That's for me, age 10.
Yeah. So it's about a young girl who ends up back in time with Anthony Babington, trying to help him free Mary and overthrow Elizabeth. And the author's name is even Allison.
God, I feel so targeted by that. Because I read so many middle grade time travel historical novels in my
And then this one, I like again, I'm just picking and choosing. There's so many. I got this. There's a whole list on Wikipedia. But so in 2001, Jane Yolen and Robert J. Harris wrote a children's novel called Queen's Own Fool, which is a novel about Mary Queen of Scots and her lady jester, Nicola, which is an interesting angle. She's also one of the Royal Diaries series. I know there's a lot of listeners who grew up reading the Royal Diaries, and that's where they have their lifelong interest in women in history. So Mary Queen of Scots, Queen Without a Country, is a novel about her set in France. And then Philippa Gregory, Phil Greggs, who never found a erotic fan fiction pamphlet she didn't turn into a 1,000-page novel. She wrote a book called The Other Queen, which is set, and we mentioned this in the episode, it's set during that time when she was staying with Bess and Mr. Bess, and then she had to stay in an inn because Elizabeth told her to stay in this castle, but the castle was in disrepair, so then Mary stayed in this pub. Triple H was there. Anyway, this book presents the idea that what if Mr. Bess of Hardwick was in love with Mary and she was using him, I guess, as part of the plotline of that, because Philippa Gregory is going to do her thing and power to her. So there's the first biography of her, I guess, major biography of her is from 1936 by Stephen Zweig. Antonia Fraser wrote a biography of her in 1969. This is the one that Lana knows best.
I own.
You've read countless times. I do want to mention also, I forget if I said this on the podcast, but Antonia Fraser, she's written, I think she's like an extremely prolific biographer from England. She's written so many biographies of so many people. And her daughter is Flora Fraser, who I interviewed about the biography of Flora MacDonald. So Flora Fraser also writes lots of biographies of people. And I appreciate this mother-daughter biography writing pair because they write a lot of things about people I want to read about. Numerous things. So John Guy wrote a biography, Queen of Scots, The True Life of Mary Stuart, which has been a big source I've been using for this podcast. This is not a book, but it's interesting. So Kevin Aucoin was a very influential makeup artist in the 1990s. He had a book where it's a big art book. I actually have a copy of it, where he took celebrities of the era and did up their makeup to make them look like people from previous eras. All of which to say he did a photo shoot with Tori Amos done up as Mary Queen of Scots, which is pretty iconic to me. Poetry. The Scottish poet Robert Burns wrote a poem, Lament of Mary Queen of Scots on the Approach of Spring, which is kind of speaks to how Scotland remembers her versus how England remembers her. So it's about her feelings about Elizabeth, and it takes place, this poem, like while she's captive in England. Shortly after her execution, the English Jesuit poet, which is interesting. In the last episode, we had the undercover Jesuits. Now we have the Jesuit poet. Robert Southwell composed a poem portraying Mary as a Catholic martyr. The poem was never published in that time.
Because he was a big-ass traitor, but like separate story with him.
Yeah, even owning a copy of this poem was basically treason. So no one read it at the time. Because remember, it was treason to even think that Elizabeth might die one day, let alone to treat Mary as any sort of martyr. Okay, Mary Queen of Scots was a common topic of opera in the 19th century. Usually these operas dealt with a period of her life when she was being persecuted by Elizabeth of England because these operas were Italian and she was a sympathetic character in Catholic countries. So, which is interesting, right? Like how she's seen in England versus how she's seen in other places. Her story proved popular among liberals and revolutionaries in 19th century Italy. They're especially attracted by the various plots made to save her, of course, because that's a great story, as well as her death as a political martyr, because they saw similarities in that to what they were dealing with. So there's a group called the Carbonari, who I guess were...
No relation to the pasta, I am assuming.
I have to assume. Yeah. So the Carbonari were a group of revolutionaries in Italy. And they took their name from a mythical ring of English coal burners, supposedly dedicated to Mary's cause. That's just an interesting sentence.
Listeners can't see the same face we're all making, which is just the,
Right? Anyway, so for this reason, the subject of Mary Stuart came to be seen as a concern of radicals, and operas about her were banned on several occasions because in Italy in the 19th century. They were all using her as an allegory for their own political struggle. Television. So we briefly so I should say, since we've last recorded an episode, so I have the Patreon, which you can join, patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter. And one of the things we've recently added is for anybody who's at the $5 a month or above level is we have a Discord, which is like a big group chat for people, for the Tits Out Brigade to talk to each other. And one topic that just came up recently, somebody asked, has anyone seen this Gunpowder, Treason, and Plot, which is a 2004 two-part miniseries. And part 1 is about Darnley's explosion, and part 2 is about the Gunpowder Plot, which is the Guy Fawkes thing and to do with James. And somebody said, has anyone seen this? And I was like, no. But I do a lot of time looking up for Instagram, like pictures of people who've played Mary and the other people. And so I've read about this series, which is very much just like Mary falls in love with Bothwell. I think it alleges that she was in love with Bothwell before she even married Darnley, that they conspired together to blow up Darnley so they could be together. Mary Queen of Scots, though, is played by the French actress Clémence Poésy, who played Fleur Delacour in the Harry Potter movies. And she's very pretty. I like her. Interesting to have a French actress. Anyway, but I forget what Lana said. I think you said something like throw it in the sea or something, like cast it in the fire. Like this whole concept is.
I'm against anything that has Mary with a romantic interest in anybody. I don't believe it. I don't buy it.
I especially don't buy that she was in love with Bothwell.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that man took advantage. But that's for later.
Yeah. There's a television show you might have heard of called Reign. It's 2013 to 2017.
It's never been mentioned on this podcast before.
Yeah. It's described here as a highly fictionalized period drama show on the CW television network.
Highly fictionalized.
And it is. And it doesn't pretend not to be. And I respect that. And there are some people who message me. They're like, Anne, like you've got me to decide, like maybe I am going to watch Reign. And I'm like, you can.
However, be aware.
Like, just know what it is and like people who, it's not for everybody. It's for me.
It features the hot bastard brother who goes off into the woods and discovers black magic and then he starts hexing people. Like, that's the kind of civilization we're getting.
Yeah. So you need to be okay with that. There's also just recently discovered recently discovered by me. So there was a Spanish and British miniseries. In Spanish, it's called Reinas, which means queens. In English, the translation is Queens, the Virgin and the Martyr. It's from 2017. And it looks super sexy. And I do feel like I might want to watch at least part of it. You can watch it. It's on Tubi, Tubi, the streaming service, apparently. Anyway, Reinas, the Virgin and the Martyr. It does seem to involve numerous confrontations between Mary and Elizabeth, which the Vanessa Redgrave movie has them meeting as well. And I understand why, if you're making a movie of this, you kind of want your two main characters to meet each other.
The impulse is understandable.
Yeah. In the Saoirse Ronan Mary movie, which again, I haven't seen in a long time, and which the three of us will probably at some point watch and discuss for Vulgar Peace Theater, perhaps in a live event, who knows. But as I recall, there's a scene at the end of it where Mary and Elizabeth are in some sort of room where there's all kinds of white, gauzy...
surrounded by laundry,
curtains.
As I recall.
And so they never actually see each other's faces, but they're talking, and there's just these white sheets between them all the time. Like, I understand narratively, you want those two people to meet each other, and I respect historical fiction and people who change things. You know what? I need to go back in and edit this Wikipedia page, because when it says fiction books, it doesn't mention A Tip for the Hangman by Allison Epstein, in which Mary Queen of Scots appears. So I'll add that later. By the time you hear this episode, hopefully that will be there. So there's the Starz television series from last year, The Serpent Queen, which is about Catherine de Medici, which numerous people mentioned to me. I have not watched it. Mary Queen of Scots appears in it, but apparently she's some sort of like fanatic religious zealot. Like, it seems like they confused her with Mary the First. Like, it sounds
or she's just being very de Guise.
Yeah.
Like super de Guise.
A number of people have asked me, like, have you watched The Serpent Queen? What do you think about her portrayal? And I hadn't. And then someone explained to me what the portrayal was. And I was like, oh, that's a take. That's a real take. And then I think most importantly, on the 13th season of RuPaul's Drag Race, contestant Rosé, am impersonated Mary Queen of Scots for the Snatch Game episode, where she received high praise for her impersonation and improvisational comedy. And I believe there is also Mary Queen of Scots drag queen on RuPaul's Drag Race UK. Claire Hunter talks about that in her book. So I like reclaiming her story in that way, because the wigs and the outfits, like,
if the drag name isn't Mary Queen of Thoughts, what are we doing? What are we doing, guys?
It's brilliant. Okay, so that's what I have for all the legacy. I love that angle. So we're gonna get to the scandalicious scale eventually.
I would like to briefly observe that Anne told us as we began to record, this will be a quick 45-minute episode. Don't worry about it.
Anne's feelings on Mary is, this is going to be fast. No.
No. We are an hour in, and we are going to get to the scoring, which will probably be time consuming, but there's a couple quick games I want to play.
I'm so excited for this.
Okay, so the first one, it's a similar game to Fuck, Marry, Kill, but it's not that. It is command, co-work, kill. So I'm going to list 3 people, and both of you need to choose who would you like to command, like who would you want to be like the manager or the boss of this person? Who would you like to co-work with? Who would you like to like have them as your coworker? And who would you like to kill of these 3 options? Okay. And I can go over those options again, because so it's like, who do you want to command? Like, who do you want to be like you're in charge and they
you are the boss of, or they are the boss of you?
You are the boss of.
Okay.
Okay, so the first option are all people called James. So the options are Mary's brother, James Stewart, Hollywood icon Jimmy Stewart, James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, and then the adult James the 1st/6th, Mary's son.
This is so hard.
Okay. Say it again.
The options are the people.
Yes, give me the people.
Okay, so the people are Mary's brother James, Bothwell, and Mary's son James.
Okay, so I'm gonna come in hot and say the only correct first choice is to kill Bothwell.
Obviously,
I feel like I can't not do that.
Yeah,
that's
so that makes
obvious.
Yeah,
and I want to command James the 6th.
Yeah,
because I feel like he is dumb enough and impulsive enough and has enough power that if I could actually be in charge of him, history would be a lot better. And I would be like, no, you dumb bitch, don't do that.
Yeah.
And I could direct him toward a more positive outcome. I feel like he's persuadable.
Yeah.
And so that makes me working alongside Hollywood icon Jimmy Stewart, which is annoying.
Yeah, because he's going to backstab you.
Yeah. I mean, he is, but he's not going to be there when it happens. And so if I have James the 6th on my side as like a bodyguard, I feel like Jimmy Stewart can't do as much.
Okay.
Because I've got full army.
Okay.
So that's my answer.
Okay.
I have the same, like everything of mine is the same, except like my reasons for being in charge of James the 6th is that I would make him not do the Bible and make him not do the Scottish witch trials and like make him like tell him that he needs to deprioritize this whole Satanism thing, because then my life would have been personally better with all of those 3 things.
Yeah. Fair. Good choices. Okay, so the same options: command, co-work, kill. And your options are all members of the Douglas family.
A Douglas.
So the options are Margaret Douglas, Darnley's mother, scheming grandma; James Douglas, the Earl of Morton, who we've been calling on this podcast Jeremy Jam from Parks and Recreation.
Ugh.
So he was the one who he was always against Mary. He was working with Cecil. He was one of Cecil's puppets to try and bring her down in Scotland. I'm just thinking for Lana what are the gross things he did? He was just like a shitty person.
He was always wrong. Every single thing he did was like, oh, fuck you.
I'm pretty sure he was involved in the Rizzio murder. He was involved in the Darnley murder. And then the third Douglas is WD-40, a.k.a. William Douglas, who is the overseer of Lochleven Castle. You might not know as much about each of them, so this is just a real gut instinct. Like Margaret Douglas, would you want to kill, co-work, or command?
See, I'm a little mad this isn't Fuck, Marry, Kill, because I want to marry Margaret Douglas. I feel like it's the kind of partnership I want in my life.
Yeah.
Which I guess means co-work in this situation.
Yeah. I think I agree with Margaret is absolutely the coworker. Like, you'd be a dangerous partnership there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think commanding Margaret, she would not listen to you. And
oh God, no.
Yeah. Elizabeth tried that shit.
That would be a pain in the ass.
Work.
It sounds like James is a really good employee. Like, he'll just do what you tell him. And I'm as effective of a leader as Cecil would be. So I think I could manage bossing him around.
And that means that we're killing William Douglas.
Anne knows I have a soft spot in my heart for William Douglas. So I'm going to command him and tell him to do better things because I feel like he would have been a better person if they gave him a chance. And I'm going to kill Councilman Jam because fuck him. But I admire Lana's I could fix him energy.
Yeah.
Like, I admire
not
that.
Fix him. Take full advantage of him. Remember.
I can manipulate him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also am obsessed with the sentence, I'm at least as good a leader as William Cecil is. That's the energy I want on this podcast at all times. Don't undersell yourself,
Definitely.
friends. You're as good a leader as William Cecil.
At least as good a leader as William Cecil. Come on. Anybody can be.
Okay, so then just one more round of this. So command, co-work, kill. And your options are the power trio. William Cecil, Francis Walsingham, Elizabeth I.
No.
Okay, so, Lord.
I want to command Walsingham. I want him to be my right-hand man because I would be unstoppable. I feel like the rest of the questions are irrelevant because I want him on my side.
Mm-hmm. Who would you kill?
I think I'd kill Walsingham. Because then he like limit it. I think as an underling, he'd go around you all the time and undermine you. I don't think he would listen.
But in your best interest, I feel like he would do the things I didn't even know I needed him.
I think he would I think he would just undermine me constantly. And
I acknowledge I am extraordinarily biased on this one.
You're a big you're so Walsingham fangirl.
You don't want to kill him.
I'm a Walsingham fan. I'm aware of that.
And I am too, which is why I respect him enough to get rid of him. I have to eliminate him as competition.
I think I would kill Cecil for the same reason that Lana would kill Walsingham, is because I feel like I can't trust him.
Mm-hmm. So then I think you're both co-working with Elizabeth.
Yeah, I would command Cecil because there's no way I'm commanding Elizabeth. There's no point in that.
No, there's no commanding Elizabeth, and I don't want to kill her.
I think Cecil's not quite bright enough to undermine me, which means that I just have to keep on top of it. I'd have to micromanage him, but that's okay. I've done that before.
And you're at least as good a leader as he is.
Right. I'm at least as good a leader as, which is like low bar. But like, yeah, he's going to be like, you go in knowing he's going to be like slimy and get out of all of the things he can possibly get out of. That's easy to deal with. So Elizabeth is just like, you don't tell her what to do. You just kind of have to work around her limitations, which is what everybody figured out how to do England the way they did, is like, Elizabeth is just going to do Elizabeth, and then you work around her and like make it seem like her idea and everything will be okay.
And I've certainly had coworkers like that where you're just like, you know what? I'm not going to change this person. I'm not going to tell them what to do. It's just like, that's what they're doing. And I'm just going to be like, how can I work around that? Yeah. Okay. So the next I've got a couple of just sort of like not rapid fire, but just like, I'm going to give you some options. You can choose which is the best. So this category is the most daring escape by Mary. There's 3 options. So as previously mentioned, when she was at Borthwick Castle, dressed as a boy, she was lowered on a bed sheets tied together as a rope directly onto a horse several stories down and then rode off. Option 1. Option 2 is after Davy Rizzio was murdered, manipulating Darnley to switch sides and then escaping with him with the help of Cock o' the North's widow, who smuggled notes in the chamber pot. And then the third option is the escape from Loch Leven with the help of young Willie. Mary Seton switched clothes, young Willie got everybody drunk, and Mary walked right out the front door.
I have a soft spot in my heart for the Loch Leven escape.
Me too. That's number 1.
They're all really good. Like, I have this soft spot in my heart for Loch Leven. It was ridiculous. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I really love the wearing the pants and being lowered onto a horse. But that's not, like, that's early Mary not quite figuring out all of her tools. And, like, anything that makes Darnley figure out he's on the right side is obviously disqualified.
Yeah. No, I agree. The Lochleven escape was cinematic. It was so extra. It was like, okay, I'm going to lose this earring. And when I pretend to find the earring, that's your signal to go over here. It's like, we're going to do it on May Day because that's when there's the Abbot of Unreason. And then we're going to get this guy drunk. And then
So I think I said this during the episode, but it is the last 15 minutes of a Knives Out movie, and I just love it so much. It's so extra. So good.
It needs to be in
It's
more
got
movies.
young Willie in it.
yeah,
Yes.
it needs to be in a movie.
It is so good.
It's so good. It should 100% be a movie. But also, Allison, there's a book that you've read that.
Yes, and it's stunningly good. It's The Tower by Flora Carr. It's coming out in the US early next year, in the UK before that. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous book entirely about Mary's year in Lochleven, and read it. I was not asked to blurb this book. I emailed the editor directly and said, please send this to me. I would like to read it. And it's really, really good.
So here's what we want. That book to come out, optioned, movie deal, Keira Knightley. Like, let's just do it.
Let's do it. Like how you just said, Keira Knightley. Like, I don't even know what role she's going to be in this movie, but I was like, yeah, okay.
Well, I think if you're doing a period drama and Keira Knightley is involved, then you're greenlit and that movie is going to happen. So
that's probably true.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a category I call the most outfittiest outfit that Mary wore. What is the most outfittiest outfit? So I'm gonna, these are not chronological, it's just as I thought of them. So the first is when she was executed, the outfit reveal, the black cloak ripped off to reveal the red inside dress with the sleeves, accessorized by crucifixes and various other Catholic paraphernalia. Another option is just any time she wore pants, just pants, is because she did. And then earlier in her story, so there's the point where the King of France died and Catherine de Medici and all the princesses were all wearing black because that was the mourning color. And Mary showed up wearing white. So she's described as looking like a dove among ravens. So just like her white mourning outfit, which was quite a statement. Her white wedding dress, which was not typical. And also, but she knew that white, this is the thing, she knew white looked good on her. So she just wore white as much as possible. And then also, this is kind of a group aesthetic. It was when she and the four Marys arrived in Scotland and they were all wearing black and white and just looked chic as fuck. And all the people in Scotland were just like, what is this? Who are they?
I'm going to go for an unconventional choice and say the group outfit. I mean, I love a dramatic death sequence quick change. Like, that's the one everybody knows. But I love that she's just like, no. I'm making an entrance into this entire country. Marys, assemble. Get in uniform. Let's go. Like, it's so badass. And I just love the energy that she has to bring everybody else, also named Mary, also wearing all the same. It's pop star energy, and I'm obsessed with
it. Yeah.
I have to go with style icon Mary Queen of Scots, originator of the white wedding dress. Like, against all rules, she wore a white wedding dress. Everybody else wears a white wedding dress because Victoria wore one. But Mary wore one because it looked good on her, and she knew it.
And she knew it was going to be an outside wedding under that tent. And so there's like jewels worked into it so that she would just glitter like the sun. Like,
she knew her angles.
She knew it was happening. Yeah, it's true. And then the final category for you to vote on is the best disguise, worn by Mary or otherwise. So the options are when she left Scotland to go to England, shaved her head and disguised herself as a boy. The second one is when she disguised herself as a washerwoman to escape Lochleven. Another option is, the third option is Mary Seton disguising herself as Mary Queen of Scots to help her escape. Those are the three options. And now we're just going to take a break for a word from our sponsors.
As a podcast network, our first priority has always been audio and the stories we're able to share with you. But at Realm, we also sell some pretty cool merch, and organizing that was made both possible and easy with Shopify. When you think about successful businesses like Aloe or Allbirds or Skims, an often overlooked secret is the business behind the business that makes selling and, for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. That's because nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret that's definitely worth talking about is that Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%. That's more happy customers and way more sales going. If you're hoping to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
Contained herein are the heresies of Radolf Buntwine, erstwhile monk turned traveling medical investigator. Join me as I study the secrets of the divine plagues and uncover the blasphemous truth that ours is not a loving God, and we are not its favored children. The heresies of Radolf Buntwine, wherever podcasts are available.
People often look at me with confusion when I ask them what their only one in the room story is. They think it has to be like mine, where I went to a 600-person event and discovered that I was the only Black person there. I know. Horrifying, right? Hi, I'm Laura Cathcart-Robbins, and I am the host and creator of the podcast Only One in the Room. Every week, my co-host Scott Slaughter and I invite you to join us for an hour and lose yourself in someone's only one story. This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt alone in a room full of people, which is to say that this podcast is for everyone.
I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
We're the Ghost Story Guys.
And every 2 weeks, we explore first-person stories of encounters with the paranormal from all around the world.
Then we have some fun reacting to those stories. We like to say our goal is to scare the hell out of you, then make you laugh.
Belief in the paranormal is not required. All you need is a love of great storytelling and curiosity about the world around you.
Come find the Ghost Story Guys on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else fine podcasts live, or at ghoststoryguys.com.
And we're back.
I'd vote for shaved head. That's so badass.
Again, soft spot for the shaved head.
She went for it.
She knew it was her finest feature, and she got rid of it in a heartbeat. Like, she had
Her one beauty.
her one beauty. And she had, like, it wasn't even a thing she had to think about. It was, I'm going to live, and I'm going to make them all regret this. And the only way that's going to happen is to get rid of this hair. So let's do it.
Well,
She didn't try to Gwyneth Paltrow it in Shakespeare in Love by just wrapping her hair into a very large hat. She was like, no, I commit.
No,
to
a very
it.
small hat.
Yeah, to a very small, impractical hat.
yeah. No, it's true. She was just like, I'm 6 feet tall. Like, that's distinctive. I have this like red crimped hair, distinctive. Like, I need to blend in somehow. Yeah.
But at 6 feet with no hair, she looked like people wouldn't think twice that she was a boy.
That's
And
just
she
some
knew
guy.
it. It was amazing.
Okay. And then the next thing we're going to do is there's so many. Well, okay. There's 4 main. 3. If there's another one that comes up, you can tell me. There are several shitty villains in this story.
So many.
There are so many.
There are incalculable villains in this story.
We have to prioritize here. We'll be here.
We're going to pick 3.
Yeah. So what I have is I made a scheme, so the villainosity scale, so we can rank them as villains. So the 4 categories, and I'll go through them again. Like, you don't have to remember them. So the four categories are: thinks he's smarter than he is, and that's a score of 0 to 10. Two-faced, again, 0 to 10. A man with a plan. So that's kind of like the scheminess rating. It's just like someone who like schemes and has a plan, and they does the plans. And then the 4th category is just bad vibes. Just like bad vibes in a bad way. I put in my notes like Colin Firth and Shakespeare in Love. Just like just like a person who you're like, ugh.
Not this guy. Yes.
With
Yeah.
time travel, too.
So Okay, so the first person we're going to talk about is Bothwell. And so the first category is thinks he's smarter than he is. 0 to 10, Bothwell.
9.5.
He's not I was going to say, he's not the first person who comes to mind with that description, but it's not true.
He got
Let's give him
lucky.
a 6.
He got lucky.
Just because he got so unlucky afterward and spent the rest of his life in Denmark in a dungeon. I just feel like he didn't think that through.
No, and he was like escaping, like stealing a ship that turned out to have been stolen by somebody else, and then he was accused of being a pirate. Like,
right?
But did he think he was smarter than he was?
He was, because
I get the impression he had a pretty healthy self-image, Bothwell.
Yeah.
He with Mary, she was in a health crisis. He wasn't like some master manipulator. He was like, she was just incapable of handling him at that moment in her life. He wasn't genius. Feelings.
So Lana, you said instinctively 9.5. Allison, you said 6. So what if we go to like...
You said 5. Did you say 9?
Lana said 9.5.
Oh, that's a hot.
I have feelings.
I'd bump up to a 7 in that case. How
about we do 7.5?
Okay. I just think we have to think about who else might be coming. I don't
They
want
can all be 10s.
That's allowed.
They're all
40s across the board.
Okay. So the next thing is two-faced Bothwell. Pretends he's nice, but is actually terrible.
Did he ever pretend he was nice?
I don't think he pretended he was nice.
No.
For like 5 minutes when he was younger.
Like a 3.
Yeah.
I don't think he tried.
At most, he barely tried.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is a man with a plan. Was he schemy? Did he have plans? Did he execute those plans? He was schemy.
I have to give him props for blowing up Darnley and then becoming the sheriff.
It's very big Yellowstone energy.
Yeah.
No, that's true. I forgot about that detail. Because he was one of the people behind the plan. It was his guy. French Paris worked for him, rolling the barrels of gunpowder down the street in front of everybody.
They weren't good plans, but you didn't specify were they good plans.
Yeah.
He had many plans. Many plans.
He got the people to sign the document being like, we all agree that you should marry Mary. Like he certainly had plans.
He did.
So I don't know how you want to score that. Like he had plans. They weren't good. But he had a plan to kidnap Mary and marry her, and he did.
He did.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good plan.
He had many plans.
I think 8, because we're knocking off 2 points for the quality of the plans, but the sheer quantity of them,
yeah.
I think, yeah.
There's a lot of plans.
I'm on board with that. Okay. And 8 is a solid number.
Okay. And this next category is extremely easy.
Bad vibes.
10.
30. 300,000.
The vibes are bad, friends.
The vibes are bad.
Okay, so he's coming in hot with a 28.5. Next is Darnley.
All right. We're going to max out our categories in a couple of these.
Okay. Darnley thinks he's smarter than he is.
That's why I was holding back, Lana, because this one's the 10.
I gave him an extra half point. He had one more half point than Bothwell.
Darnley was writing letters to Catherine de Medici, to the Pope. Like, he thought he was so hot. He thought.
I'm just imagining Catherine de Medici and Darnley in the same room.
I gotta think about it all the time.
That would just be so embarrassing for him.
But he wouldn't know. He'd think he was doing a great job.
He would.
And that'd be like an episode of The Office. The cringe would be so high.
He was writing letters to Catherine de Medici being like signed like King Henry of Scotland, being like, hey, can you send an army to like help me take over to get the crown matrimonial? Like he was unhinged. His self-confidence was so unwarranted. That's definite 10. Okay, but was he two-faced?
I mean, he wanted to be.
I don't think he was smart enough to be two-faced.
He was sure he was two-faced.
He thought he was tricking anyone, but
He was just not scheming. He was just like, "No, this is what I'm to."
Yeah, I'd go with that.
because he showed up and he was hot and tall, and people were like, "Oh, that's great. He's hot and tall." But then very quickly, it's like, "Oh no, this is the worst person we've ever met."
But he was still hot and tall. That wasn't all deception. He was just a hot, tall dummy.
That's true.
He was a fuck boy.
Do we want to give him as much as 2 for Two-Faced? He thought he was. He thought he was.
He thought he was. He was trying so hard, the poor boy.
I think we have to give him a couple points for his goddamn effort to get the crown matrimonial. That was two-faced, but like it wasn't two good faces. It wasn't success.
I mean, he wasn't always two-faced to Mary. Sometimes he was two-faced to somebody else.
I forget. I think I shared with you this comment that somebody sent me because in the episode where Allison and I were talking about Darnley and everything, and it kept like we were saying like he really wanted Mary to have sex with him, and he also really wanted to get the crown matrimonial. And somebody was like, for most of the episode, they thought that when we said he wanted the crown matrimonial, they thought that meant sleep with Mary.
I laughed for like 5 minutes. Thank you, commenter.
That was amazing, and I loved it so much.
You want to go up the secret sex stairs and give me the crown matrimonial? Like,
and who's to say he didn't?
He might have meant it. Who knows?
He might have thought it was the same thing.
He could have been absolutely convinced it was the same thing.
Yeah, and that's why he wanted to sleep with her so much. He thought that would somehow mean something. Okay, so man with a plan. Did Darnley have? Well, he had plans.
He had thoughts in his head.
I don't know if I give him credit for calling them.
Yeah.
I think he had goals.
Plans have steps that are executable.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not like scribbled drawings on with crayon on whatever piece of paper you have nearby.
Although that can work for evidence this time, as we all know.
Yeah.
You think we should give him a 1 just out of pity?
Okay.
It's like he had a plan. He had no steps to the plan.
No.
Yeah.
It was a sketchy plan at best.
I think his plan was just kind of like to sit back and wait for life to turn out well for him without him having to do anything.
If I'm pretty enough and I'm good enough at things, then I get good stuff.
Okay, but he wasn't good enough at the thing.
No.
But I could be.
He thought he was. Okay, and then bad vibes.
I mean, he's red flags.
I'm gonna say 9.
Yeah.
And the reason is because there was one moment in the story we were like, look at this hot young dummy. And I have no problem with a hot young dummy. I don't think his vibes are as bad as Bothwell's vibes. I think he's just, like, bless his heart in a way. So that's why I would knock 1 off. Lana would.
I would knock 1 off as well.
He is absolutely like he's red flags, but he's not bad vibes in the way Bothwell is bad vibes.
Yeah. He's
that boyfriend you have in college that you know you shouldn't date, but you do anyway. And then it goes terribly wrong. And you're like, yep, that's exactly what happened there. I did that.
Yeah, but it's like, but he was hot and tall. So yeah. And that's how you get caught in it. Okay.
That's how they get you.
Okay, the next candidate is Mary's brother, James Stewart, Hollywood icon Jimmy Stewart. I know where he's going to score high, but the first category is thinks he's smarter than he is.
I mean, he did get assassinated like 6 months into his regency, right?
Yeah. But he
obviously was not great at that.
I think.
But he was pretty effective.
Yeah, his vibe is not thinks he's smarter than he is. Like, he actually was good. Like, he was successful in a lot of things. So he maybe was as smart as he thought he was.
I think he was killed because he was successful. Like, I think he actually was smart. Like, Julius Caesar was also killed by his friends because he was anti-landlord and they were landlords. Like, that's not smarter. Like, that's not a smart thing. That's just a overestimated thing.
Yeah.
So I'd say like a 2. Like, I think he actually was. I think there were some times where he screwed up, but for the most part, he actually was pretty effective.
Yeah. And he ended up being assassinated because by that family who somebody in the Discord says whenever they think about the Hamilton family, they call them the Babysitters Club because Their family's whole deal is like, when there's a baby king of Scotland, we're the regents. And they were so mad about it that James became the regent that they assassinated him. They're like, no,
our job.
we are the Babysitters Club. Like, that's why he was assassinated, which is not to do with him being smart or not. It's just with them being unhinged Babysitters Club.
Wait, what was Darnley's total? You didn't do the math for me.
Darnley's total was 22. So Bothwell's outpaced Darnley.
Okay.
So we started off high. So what do we think for think he's smart? I think just like, I don't know, 2 or something. Like, I don't think that's really his vibe.
Yeah.
But the next category is two-faced.
10.
And that's a 10.
Lion, son of a fucking bitch.
In the high 50s.
Like, could not be more. Like, how many times did he go to civil war? Like, that he led against Mary, and then he's like, I'm your brother, do. And then like, I'm at war against you again. Like, oh, but we're siblings. Like, constantly. And Mary kept falling for it because what other choice did she have? Man with a plan.
There were a lot of plans.
So many plans, and with steps, and he executed on and most of them. Like, he was very good. I would go.
He was the best planner of the 3 weeks.
Yeah, he's definitely a man with a plan. I would knock 1 point off because some of the plans were Cecil put the plans in his head.
They weren't necessarily his plans.
Yeah, man was Cecil's plan.
Yeah, so I would say like an 8 or a 9. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd go with a 9.
8.5?
8.5.
9. I'm also at 9.
Let's say 9.
Okay.
9, yeah.
Let's go 9.
And then bad vibes. I think he doesn't have as much bad vibes because Mary kept trusting him.
I also think like 90% of his problem was the patriarchy. Because she was a girl and he was a boy.
Yeah.
That like, it wasn't necessarily that he was this malicious, terrible human being like Bothwell. or the pretty himbo with all the bad ideas like Darnley. He was just like, well, but I'm a boy. Like, he had very big Kendall Roy energy.
If he had been legitimate, he would have been the king. And at one point, he tried to get himself named legitimate. Like, he tried to dissolve his mother's marriage to say that when she had him with the king, that like, so the patriarchy in that way as well, like the legitimate versus illegitimate thing like that, primogeniture got in his way as well. So yeah, I don't think he's necessarily bad vibes.
I mean, how would you describe his vibes then?
Asshole.
Yeah.
Like, he was an asshole, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't I am going to kidnap you while you're at your weakest and try to make you sleep with me. He was, but I'm a boy. You don't understand, I'm a boy.
So that's bad vibes in like an incel way, not bad vibes in like a mass murderer way. Yeah. They're not good vibes, but they're not, so I don't know.
That's why I'm at a 5. I will go with a 6.
6 is fair.
I'm not saying the patriarchy is good.
No.
That gets him up to 27. So, like, the reason why Darnley is lagging behind is the lack of plans.
Because he's so dumb. He's too dumb to be a villain.
Yeah. Well, this is why I wanted to score this, because I'm just like, who was the most villainous villain? Every week after the episodes, I had Instagram polls, and it was interesting. It's interesting to watch people's thoughts change, because initially, and this is what we're getting to, is John Knox is our next candidate. But at first, everyone's just like, fuck you, John Knox. But then eventually people start being like, Hollywood icon Jimmy Stewart. And they're like, we hate you, Darnley. Then like, we hate you, Bothwell. And then it's like, William Cecil. Like, people kept like, as the story went, it's like, who's the villain of the week? And it would change.
It is a villain of the week.
There was a consistent voting block that would always vote for John Knox, even in episodes he wasn't in. Because
patriarchy. He is bad vibes patriarchy. Like, he is
Yes. Oh no.
You're right. That's different vibes.
Okay, but that's who we have next is John Knox. So thinks he's smarter than he is.
I think he actually was pretty smart.
I think he was. Yeah, I don't think that's not his vibe.
I think he thought he was more holy.
Or more accurate than he was.
So this would be a low, like a 1? 3?
Yeah. Let's go 2.
2, okay.
Because he thought he was smarter than God.
That's true. Actually, yeah. The next one is two-faced, and I'm gonna be bold and say 0 because John Knox.
who he was every single fucking step of the way.
He showed up every day, John Knox.
There was never any.
There's a lot of it too.
I'm gonna say almost to his credit, like Darnley Hollywood icon Jimmy Stewart, Bothwell, they each had moments where Mary was like, oh, maybe I can trust this person. John Knox was just like, fuck you. You're a woman. You're a Catholic. You're French. I hate you. Like, that's how he greeted her, and he never wavered. Like, she always knew where she stood with him, which in a way is helpful.
It's refreshing, really, with this story.
Yeah. A man with a plan. His plan was the Scottish Reformation, and he
did
it through force of will, through his own innate charisma.
And unfortunately for him, the Presbyterian Church that resulted from his Reformation is one of the most open and anti-patriarchy, pro-LGBTQ sects that exists. So, like, thanks for that.
The vibe is real. Where's your God now, John Knox? Like, in the churches that he founded, which is delightful. Yeah, here there was, when there was the Pride Parade here where I live in Saskatoon, it was like the parade marshaled just before we have Knox United Church is like in the city. And the Knox United Church, like they opened the doors, like you could use their bathroom, like their front lawn. They had like a viewing party. I was just like, oh man, where's your God now, John Knox?
Incredible.
People were walking past, like the Pride Parade. It was beautiful. It was a lovely parade, and this group was passing by with their signs that say "Abortion is healthcare," just right past the Knox United Church, and I was just like, yes.
And people were on the lawn cheering.
Yeah, it was lovely. Okay, so man with a plan. He did have a plan for the Scottish Reformation, which in order to make that happen, he needed to destabilize Mary's reign, and he did. So. I don't know, like 7, 8, more, less.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd agree with an 8. Like it wasn't really, Mary was incidental.
Yeah.
He wasn't working against Mary. He was working against the Guises, basically, like how Catholic she was. And if she had been less Catholic, she would have just been like, I mean, she still would have been a woman and he still would have been the worst human being, but like...
Yeah.
He could have just pointed at her in the street and been like, a whore.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have needed to go quite
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, whore.
Whore. Okay, and then bad vibes. John Knox,
bad vibes are a 10, right?
10. Oh, yeah. No, he's patriarchy 10.
Even the statues of John Knox are all him like pointing and yelling as though he's going, whore! Like, that's what...
Oh, judgmental.
And so he gets a 20. So the rankings are, from top to bottom, Bothwell, 28.5. Jimmy Stewart, 27. So close. They're also the people who were actively working against... No, I was going to say for the longest time, but they weren't. Jimmy Stewart was in like almost every episode. He was in every episode. Bothwell just kind of showed up, was terrible, and then left.
But he was so terrible so loudly that, yeah, he was the worst. I stand by that.
The thing, and I love hearing from listeners who weren't as familiar with this story, who were just like, you see Darnley and you're just like, wow, that was a shitty person. And then Bothwell comes in and it's like, how is Bothwell more shitty in a shorter period of time? How could you be like, well, Darnley, well, that's clearly her worst husband. Oh, wait. How about this guy she was married to for 1 month?
And now you know this, and now you're going to watch every single Mary, Queen of Scots thing and go, why the hell are they making them romantic interests with each other? Like, why? Yeah. What narrative choice was made there?
Well, no, and the narrative choice that's being made there, too, is what was being seeded at the time by, like, the people making the pamphlets. Like, before Mary even ran off with Bothwell, the mermaid poster and stuff.
The Tits Out Mermaid.
The Tits Out Mermaid. They're just being like, Mary... Like, because she relied on him as a counselor, they're just like, oh, this narrative was being built that she was this unstable, flighty, like, horny dum-dum, like, during her life.
It's his victim blaming. Like, literally, like, everything that comes out afterwards is Bothwell's victim blaming of, oh, she wanted it, oh, she loved me, oh, this is what was supposed to be. And she was absolutely taken advantage of, assaulted, and like at her lowest and at her weakest. Mm-hmm. And the story remains that he planted, and that's just, it's an atrocity. Like, yeah. It's a patriarchal awfulness.
It's interesting. I mean, it sucks, obviously. seasons are interesting to be sort of even-handed about it. But when George Buchanan wrote that like erotic fan fiction, being like, "Oh, Mary let Bothwell in the back door" or whatever, even he like it was so tricky because they were trying to be like Mary is a whore, but not during the period of time in which James was conceived. Like she was having an affair with Rizzio, but not to the point that James was Rizzio's son. Like she was in love with Bothwell, but not.
But James is totally legitimate.
So it's like she was this nymphomaniac slut whore, except for this like period of time when she conceived this child. Like so it's like the narrative, because they want to blame her and say that she's so slutty, but you can never call into question James's father. It's just like that's how you know that it's shit. Like it's bullshit. Like yeah. Although I will say, James for his whole life, there's rumors that Rizzio was his father. They call him like the Italian son because he had like dark hair, and then his descendants had dark hair, and it's like that's because it's a dominant gene, and also because there are numerous people with dark hair that married into this family. Like even Charles II was called like the Italian and stuff because he had like dark hair. Like, oh, Rizzio's the dad. Like anyway.
No one's ever been, I've said this many times in this podcast, no one's ever been more Darnley's son than James VI.
Yeah.
Fuck off with that.
I got my dark hair from my Scottish line. What the heck? It's allowed. Especially with red hair. Like dark hair is always going to win over red hair.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. The fact that James had like dark hair. Actually, there's something I wanted to say. And I'm going to put this picture on Instagram when we post this episode. So there's a part I was listening just because the last episode, just the early access to the last episode just came out, and I was listening to it, and I was just like, I got carried away. I just started listening. I'm just like, me and Allison are hilarious. This is great. Listen to us go. But there's a part of the story where Mary, like it was a really sad part where she had been sent a portrait of James, and she wrote back being like, this looks different from the other portrait. Like, who is this by? Is this what he looks like? And I was like, wait, was that the portrait of sassy James hand on hip with the falcon?
With the falcon, my favorite portrait of any royal ever.
And I like to think I don't know if it was that portrait, but it was around when he was that age. So if they're like, here's your son, and he's like sassy, hand on hip, posing with a falcon, being like, like I am Darnley miniature. Like,
can you on the Instagram put that picture right next to the one of Darnley and that like orange thing when Mary's refusing to hold his hand? Because they're making the same facial expression.
That's just kind of like, do you just want to smack that face? Yeah.
You sure do.
Anyway, that was just something that, because I was like, wait, a portrait of young James. I'm like, the only portrait of young James I've ever seen is that one where he just looks like so sassy and just like the nightmare person that he is.
Mm-hmm. So in conclusion for this segment, fuck Bothwell.
Basically, yeah.
The end.
Okay, so we're getting into the official regular scoring categories. And so we have the Lady Jane Seymour Memorial Award for Outstanding Supporting Performance.
Anne knows who my pick is.
Who's your pick?
I mean, Rizzio.
It's gotta be Rizzio, right?
There's no other options. Like, it's Rizzio.
There's one other option, and it's Mary Seton.
Mm-hmm.
But,
she's up there.
She's up there, but like, it's the difference. Like, you love your hairdresser, but then there's your bestie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, but she was her hairdresser in prison for like 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, Mary was a very good friend. Mary Seton, all of the Marys were good friends until, they weren't. But
Mary Seton was, I don't know. And the reason I started this category was because it was so rare. There were so many stories, like it became notable. Like I've done however many episodes, 100 or something. And there's like 10 people have ever gotten this award because there's so many stories where just like everyone is terrible. So like when someone is nice, I would give it, I mean, Rizzio, here's the thing. I would give Mary Seton the regular award for outstanding supporting performance because like she was there, she was making Mary's outfits, she was styling her wigs, like she was there for her basically for as long as she was allowed to be. Rizzio is like a level higher, which is where I feel like this is where we get into like, do we rename something in his honor? Like,
I think that we should keep the Jane Seymour level, and then for extremely outstanding performance, like a lifetime achievement award sort of thing, we can also award the Jeweled Tortoise to someone in this role.
I like that because he is the Jeweled Tortoise Award for outstanding. Like,
yes,
yeah, the Jeweled Tortoise Award
for legendary friend behavior.
Yeah.
And I'm over here like, crap, I have to add things to the website now.
I don't think there will be very many jeweled tortoises in Anne's future episodes.
No, but David Rizzio gets like he's a higher.
Queen Christina's bestie was also a jeweled tortoise.
He was, and so is Hortense Mancini's best friend. I forget his name.
It's a very limited number.
Yeah, but these guys.
So like the boys. when it's a boy, then it's a jeweled tortoise award.
It's like everyone's gay best friend gets this award. Yes.
I would like one.
And wait, we're sure that's not James's dad?
I'm trying to think. I'm looking at my list of like who is that person who was Christina's friend? Oh, Azzolino. Yeah. That was the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have a thing on the website, Lana, for the outstanding supporting performance? Or that's just a thing one day you'll
No, but we should.
I can send you the list. Yeah, because these are people who like some of these are like Lady Jane Seymour did a great thing, and that's why she got the award named after her. Like she ran out in the street, like grabbed a random priest, got her friend married, and then like died. Like it was great best friend behavior, but David Rizzio was like, yeah, the Jewel Tortoise Award level. Absolutely. And then we get into the scandalicious scale. So the three of us have real strong feelings, which is great. Like nothing wrong with our real strong feelings, but I do want to both not get carried away, but not undersell this. And this is the challenge where whenever I'm scoring anybody, I'm just like, tens. I'm like, no, I have to like think about this. Like the fact that I did 10 episodes about Mary Queen of Scots does not mean that, necessarily all of her scores are good. They could be all 10s.
But we have to, what we're holding her in comparison to is not like her story, but like in the oeuvre of these amazing women that existed throughout history, where does she fall?
Exactly.
We're only talking about people who are.
No, exactly. I mean, like we're talking like this is a scale in which Catherine de Medici
not Charlotte.
Charlotte has a 0 or a 1.
She has 1. Correct?
She has a 1. You argued me up.
She has a 1. But like we're talking about Catherine de Medici has 35.5, like on a scale of 40. The highest anyone has ever gotten is Fredegonde has a 38. But that's why I renamed the scale the Fredegonde Memorial Scandaliciousness Scale, because like she had such an effect on me. But you can never go higher than a 10. And that's why the 4 categories balance each other out, right? Like to get a high score in all of them. Although I think Mary is like, this is not going to be a low score.
Yeah, she's going to be up there in the top 10 at least.
So the first category is scandaliciousness. And I'm going to read you. So Jennifer Morag Henderson, again, the author of The Mary Queen of Scots, Daughters of the North is the name of her book. It's so good. It's a dual biography of Mary Queen of Scots and Jean Gordon, and it's really good. And Jennifer and I have an email correspondence. She sends me corrections sometimes to things I say that are inaccurate about Scotland. She also shared pictures on her Instagram of she went to visit the salt pans where Jean Gordon's salt was, and she saw people doing a salt making demonstration, and she got to take home salt. I was so jealous. It was the Jean Gordon salt. Anyway, so scandal. Here's what she says. And again, this is a Scottish person who has written about Mary Queen of Scots. So her point of view. So she says, scandalous. She was definitely seen as scandalous. This is my question for her and for you, but this is her answer, is like, how much was Mary a scandalous person? Like, I need to separate how much was she seen as scandalous and how much was she actually? Because like she showed up and John Knox was just like this fucking nymphomaniac where it's like, she just showed up. She's super Catholic and she's 18. Like, so what did she actually do? And how much was it just people putting that on her? So she says, she's definitely seen as scandalous in her time and then for a long time after, even now, though the reasons for people thinking her scandalous have changed over time. At first in France, she's even a little bit scandalous for things like riding astride or being Scottish or being tall. Then in Scotland, scandalous for being Catholic and young and wanting to dance. Then when they go for her reputation, all sorts of scandalous. And now perhaps still a bit scandalous for being a woman in a man's world, or even scandalous because people argue over her significance. So she says a 9 or a 10. What are your thoughts? Like, she did treason. Like, that's scandalous. I would discount the entire Bothwell situation. Like, people saw it as scandalous, but that was done to her. That was not her.
That's going in the sexism category. We're going to hold on that.
Yeah. Darnley was exploded, but that was not to do with she was near that scandal. Rizzio was murdered. She was near that scandal, but that wasn't her being scandalous. Like that was just
Lots of scandal happened around her.
Mhm.
And
But
that's hard to separate.
I think her daring escapes come into the scandalousness, though. I feel like the daring escapes and the disguises and the climbing out of windows, I'd put that in scandal a little bit. It
yeah,
might be more of a scheme, but I feel like you did it.
Yeah, dressing as a boy.
like just wearing pants and walking around was she did that on purpose, and she knew it would shock people.
Exactly. And she did that to shock people. And she rode horses and like the exercise thing. Like she did things that were not expected of her either as a queen or as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she had no qualms about it. Like it didn't stop her.
Yeah.
That society's expectations, or the fact that like people were actively trying to kill her most of the time, she still did these things that were against society.
It's true. And I appreciate that she was like true to herself in that way. And people saw this as scandalous. And yeah, so exactly. Those are things she did. Yes.
And then the treason, like actively trying to turn France against England again. Like, little things like that.
Yeah. Like the treason, she did treason via embroidery. She did treason via letters. She tried to marry T-Dog. Like
she had a secret spy code.
Okay, this is a provocative question, but are we describing schemes rather than scandal?
Oh, that's true. That is scheminess. But scandal is like the scandal I would say is the dressing up, even the making marmalade and pretending to be poor almost. Like that kind of stuff is we're used to that from Marie Antoinette, but even in Marie Antoinette's time that was scandalous.
I think what's scandalous, like the schemes are like doing the treason is schemy, but like in other ones where I've taught, and again, like I have to just say, like the scandaliciousness scale is not scientific and it's all vibes based. But I mean, like if somebody like Frances Howard, it's like she like put together a group of people, like that's a scheme, and then murdered a person to marry her lover, like that's scandal. Like doing the scheme is separate. Like the scandal is like she did treason. She was found guilty of treason. Like that's scandalous. She was executed for treason. That's scandalous. But like the codes and the ciphers, that's more scheminess. So it's like the end result to me.
Yeah. How she did it is the scheminess. The results of the things that she did is the scandalous.
Yeah.
I agree with like the 9 or the 10, but Allison can talk me down.
I feel like I'm being caught up in what the scandals are, and I'm like, okay, it was scandalous at the time, but I don't think most people were against her because of her scandalous behavior. They were against her because of like political position and like who they would have rather have had.
Yeah, it's like,
but if they take that away, it just because she's a lot of her is tainted by just how much is going on all at the same time.
I'm trying to focus in on like her.
Yeah.
Take away everybody else. Everything was perfectly normal in Scotland. The Queen's running around wearing pants and making marmalade and getting in fights with like local workers. Like that would be rather scandalous.
Rather scandalous, but like not as scandalous as murdering your lover, right? Like it's not that kind of a scandal.
she's also like not to defend John Knox or to side with him at all, but the fact that, and this is something Jennifer pointed out to me, she's got like a real even head where I don't about John Knox. But the fact that Mary Queen of Scots was like throwing dance parties at the castle while there was like a cost of living crisis and people were poor was like a bad move. Like John Knox was like, she's a whore and she's dancing, but he was also saying like people are dying and you're spending money on, chocolate fountains.
People are dying, Kim.
Yeah. She had very Marie Antoinette vibes.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of personality overlap between the two when you take everything away.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I'm coming in at an 8, which may be overly conservative.
No, I think an 8 for scandal. Like she's like a lot of what there's going to be able to talk about scheminess, significance, sexism, but the scandalous that she's seen as scandalous, but we don't give points just because people think that. We give points because she's doing things on purpose, knowing that they're scandalous. And she threw the party. She like ran around wearing pants. Like she did a treason.
She did a whole treason.
Yes, but most of her scandalous reputation is stuff that's not true.
Exactly, and that's why I don't wanna be yeah, exactly. So but she was so I'm almost like I'm okay with an 8, I could go to a 7. Lana, what do you think?
I'm siding with your author friend, and I'm gonna go a 9. So
Let's do 8.5.
8, 8.5, 8.5 sounds reasonable
Okay.
to me.
8.5, okay. So the next one is the scheminess. I'll tell you what Jennifer says. She says, "Very schemy, especially in England with the cipher letters. But since she is scheming at a time of other brilliant schemers, Catherine de' Medici, William Cecil, and she ultimately fails where they succeed, I'm going to take points off. 8 or 9."
Ooh, bold. Because I feel and we've talked about this, Anne, like, Cecil and Catherine de' Medici had people with them. Like, they were not a solo operation, and I feel like Mary was a solo schemer in a world of network schemers, and the fact that she held her own for, like, 40 plus years
Yeah.
is pretty impressive to me.
Like, how many daring escapes did she have based on her charisma alone?
Yeah.
Like, these people, she walks into this castle, no friends, no support system, and she walks out with somebody helping her. That's a level of scheminess that is like unheard of. Like, and I'm, as you all know, a very big Catherine of Aragon fan, but Catherine of Aragon was taught to be that. She was raised in like one of the schemiest places,
Catherine de' Medici, not Catherine of Aragon.
like to this day. Catherine de' Medici, sorry.
Ugh.
Catherine de' Medici, like huge Catherine de'
I was
Medici
like, tell
fan.
me more about this.
Catherine de' Medici, literally the child of the person that Machiavelli wrote The Prince for, grandchild of the person
Yeah.
the prince was about. Like, that's her soul. And Mary is just like, she doesn't have a support system. She doesn't have any of those things. She walks into the room and leaves with a support system. And I think that, like, in addition to the embroidery and creating her own cipher system and all of this stuff, like,
Hiding them in a barrel of wine.
just out of this world number.
No, I think I agree. I agree. And I think because like what she's up to in England, for sure. And then also just like what sticks with me is after Rizzio was murdered, she was whatever, like 8 months pregnant. Like her friend had just been like murdered in front of her by 200 people who she thought she could trust, including her brother and her husband. And then she just like stays up through the night. She uses her ladies. I love the like ladies supporting ladies, but she pretends to be going into labor so that like she gets Darnley to switch sides and then she rides off on a horse, raises an army, like not even the raising the army part, but just the fact that she was in that castle with a bunch of people who were prepared to murder her and she turned it around just on vibes, like just on her own innate resiliency. Like I would give her a 10 for scheminess. I think that's yeah.
I would too.
Yeah. And I think that's telling for us, like that she gets an 8.5 for scandal, a 10 for scheminess. That's kind of the thesis of this whole season. And that's kind of what Lana was waiting for me to realize, which is that like she was so smart. She was so schemy. She was so resilient. And people are just like, oh, she was this like head over heels woman who like fell for the wrong guy. And like, no.
All these terrible things happened to her.
No, she was directing her own story as much as she possibly physically could every single step.
Yeah. The fact that she, like, for 6 years, she was Queen of Scotland when every minute of every day, everybody there was working against her is, like, very impressive, and it's due to her schemes. Yeah.
Every gap in a movie that you see about Mary Queen of Scots is her being badass secretly in some way. Like, they only show the men's highlights. They never show her highlights. And that's all intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, because then it challenges the whole thing about, like, if we see her as capable, then it makes Elizabeth a more complicated, morally gray person instead of just this heroine who had no choice.
Elizabeth deserves to be a complicated, morally gray person. Elizabeth deserves to be a human being that we look back on and understand in a different way. She doesn't deserve to be some sort of deified figure.
Yeah.
She was a complicated person in a complicated situation, and she did the best she could.
No, it's the slippery slope. I don't know if I can think of another example offhand, but it's just like when you challenge somebody's worldview to this level, then it's like, wait, so does that mean sometimes you see people, I don't know, like on social media or whatever, like some man who like is almost getting it. He's like, well, if every time you talk to a woman that doesn't want to talk to you is sexual harassment, then I guess I've been sexually harassing women all my life. And it's like, yeah.
You're so close.
Exactly.
It's
You're
like
so close to getting it.
It's like if you realize that something that you've been believing or thinking your whole life is terrible, then it calls into question everything. And so if people suddenly start thinking like, oh, if Elizabeth wasn't perfect, like if Elizabeth wasn't justified in everything she did, then that calls into question the whole concept of how they think of England and the monarchy and everything. And then it's like, oh, but you don't want to go down that road. But by seeing Mary in this complex way, yeah, it forces that.
My comparison is explaining the founding fathers to Anne, a Canadian. It's like, I already know they're terrible people and they're fallible humans, but every time I have to explain something about that era of history to Anne, I realize something deeper of, no, they were really just messed up human beings that were doing the best they could. And that we got 200 years of a relatively stable society out of it. It wasn't a good society, but a relatively stable society was kind of impressive for those dumb kids.
No, that's exactly the same thing. If you start being like, well, if the founding fathers weren't like literal saints who knew exactly the right things to say at all times, that calls into question the entire foundation of the United States. And then it's like, not everyone wants to go down that journey. So that's what's so interesting about the Mary and Elizabeth thing. And the way you described it, Lana, I'm glad you described it on the podcast because you've said this to me before, but just the fact that everything was based on like all the Mary stuff, like avoids her scheminess, because if you confront that, then you confront, well, why did she have to be so schemy? Like, oh, because Elizabeth also was. Oh, because like there was a chance Mary could have won. Like, yeah. And it just causes these conversations that challenge people's worth.
Well, and it also questions the fact that was the combination of England and Scotland inevitable?
Mm-hmm.
Could Scotland have remained free and independent had it made different choices? And England in particular wanted that to feel inevitable.
Yes.
And by weakening Mary, by making it seem like Mary was weak and powerless, she had to have given birth to James, who was powerful, and England needed James, so therefore they needed to combine their powers. But did they? And if you see Mary as a powerful, capable woman of leadership, could Scotland now be free? Yes, obviously.
No, and that's just a real Jesus and Mary sort of situation. It's like Mary existed just as a womb to bring forth James. And that's very much how James remembered her on her tomb. It's like, here's the woman who gave birth to me.
I am important. And James thought it was a coup to have combined the two countries and to be the leader of both.
Yeah.
But I don't think I don't think the people who live in Scotland would necessarily agree with him based on recent voting. Some people would, but that's okay. That's for them to figure out.
And I think that Scotland was in the position it was in, like, is able, like, I don't know. It worked out that James was a boy and that Elizabeth didn't have children and he was able to go over and become the new king. But also Scotland had like 5 or 6 boy kings in a row. So the asshole lords had this way too much power because there kept being these minority rules of these little boys. So like the asshole lords got so powerful, but they were so chaotic and just dum-dums that Scotland kind of was easier for England to absorb. But if someone like Mary had come in and had support, then it could have turned around. But this leads us into the significance category. And so this is where I was really curious what Jennifer thinks as a Scottish person. Okay. So she says, this is long, but it's good. So there's an argument that Mary isn't ultimately that significant, as she doesn't change the way the Protestant Reformation goes in Scotland, and she doesn't reign very long. But I don't think that's true. Obviously, there's the fact she's James's mother, so her lineage lives on in that way, both in terms of people and events, the union of Scotland and England, everything that happens with the Stuarts. Mary also looms over everything from her own time right down to now. People do know who she is. I think that's significant. Like, even people who don't know the story have heard the name Mary Queen of Scots. And they think about her, and that had and has a cultural effect and significance. She made people think about what having a female monarch meant. Her life made people think about what happens if the monarch doesn't want the same as the people of the country. She's linked with Scotland, and it makes people think about Scottish identity. At the time, she made people think about religion. Her death made people think that monarchs could be executed. Like, that's significant, right? And that's why Elizabeth waited so long to do it. And then her significance after her death and her impact on Scottish culture has to be considered as huge. There are so many people writing about her, painting her, taking fashion inspiration from her, making TV shows about her. So I reckon she needs extra points for cultural significance. What about an 8? Extra points for significance to culture, but loses points for not having as much impact on Scotland. And this is kind of where I fall on it is, and this is why I emailed her, because I was just like, I don't know what to think. Because like, there's so many things. It's like Mary, she haunted this castle and that's in this hotel, and like that's good for tourism. But it's like, it's almost like the boogeyman. It's like, it's not about actual Mary Queen of Scots. It's just, it's the ghost. She reigned for 6 years, but Scotland was in such a state. Like, even if Jimmy Stewart had been there, like if she had stayed in France and he had been the regent because she was in France, like England probably still would have taken over. So like, I don't know. Mary tried to stop that from happening, but it still did happen. So just trying to separate, like, so there's the truth. There's the cultural significance, and then there's the actual like world significance. And I'm not sure where I fall on it.
It's just hard to separate what Mary herself did and what her personal significance is. I just and I think it sounds like Jennifer is too, of giving all of her significance to what her descendants and her children did. Like, that feels funky to me. Like, the descendants of Mary Queen of Scots, tremendous significance. Like, that line going forward, we've talked about it many times in this podcast, is like responsible for a lot of okay things and a lot of really, really bad things. But like Mary herself, I don't want to define her by James for because James sucks, but like her as a person. Deep
Okay.
breath from Lana
Yeah.
on the mic.
Yeah.
So, all right. I appreciate that Scotland, within Scotland itself, Mary Queen of Scots is not perceived as, like, she is significant and ghosts and whatever. But I think her impact, yes, through her descendants, but also through life choices, the things that happened in her existence, the people she ended up with, the things that she did have fundamentally changed the entire world. And there are very few people that we talk about on this episode whose first marriage could have entirely changed the entire face of the world, let alone the second or third marriage. And if Bothwell had killed James, let's just pretend, we wouldn't have English colonialism the way we have it today. We wouldn't even have had Puritans. Like, American society would be fundamentally different because Oliver Cromwell wouldn't have had weak kings to work against. We wouldn't have had so many things that made the British Empire that we know today exist because of very few incidences in this one woman's life. Yes, James was an asshole and he made all these choices, but if she had been better, like if things had been slightly different with her first marriage, or if Catherine had let her marry Charles the way he wanted to, and they had continued the French line that way, that would have changed the world. If things had gone different with Rizzio, if things had gone different with Darnley, if all of these people in this one woman's life had gone even slightly differently, we might not even be speaking English at this point. And so I don't think, as an individual within Scotland, I agree. Like, maybe she's an 8 or a 9. But there's a reason why Edison, who was probably just as patriarchal and anti-woman as John Knox was, chose her as one of his first, like one of the first things to talk about, because her, like, Mary was an influence in America of Scottish American descent. Like, even like the fact that my family thinks that they're descendant of Mary is a common thing in American Scottish people, is like, oh yeah, we're related to the Stuarts somehow, is just, it's a thing I've heard so many times. And so claiming descent of her and what happened to her and her story has, like, as an individual, has transcended Scotland and transcended England and the Isles, but also, like, the significant events of her life significantly impacted the entire world and not just one little country. It wasn't just about what happened in Scotland. It was about what happened everywhere. And so like, that's why I will always say she's a 10, and not just because like as a 7th grader, I was obsessed with her. It's just because I having studied history, I don't see these sliding glass doors moments in people, because most people's life choices do not have that level of impact. Most people, even like James being James, his individual choices didn't cause what happened after. It was the stuff that happened to Mary that caused James to be the worst person. And so that's my argument. I will defer to you because, again, my bias is strong and deep, and I've thought about it for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What number did you say, Allison? Because Lana's coming in with a 10. Jennifer's saying 8 or 9. Yeah, what number are you thinking?
Now I'm thinking 9.5 seems fair.
I'm thinking 9.5 as well, just because of the sliding glass doors, but also the cultural impact. Like, I wouldn't put it at a 10 because Lana went, like, I love that you came in here hot and like with a really like debate award worthy, like you win the debate for sure.
Fully unfurl the scroll with your talking points.
I'm not going to let it pass me by without taking the opportunity, and you know that.
No more you should.
I will do it randomly in a chat, so I might as well do it on your podcast.
No, have this on record, have it recorded, and soon in a transcript as well. But where I'm
For
taking
posterity.
Where I'm taking up the 0.5 is because one thing you said, which is like, because, you know, I agree a lot of the things in her life defined what happened in the modern age, but I won't say that it's all her choices. Like Frances died. Catherine didn't let her marry Charles because her uncles had been fucking around. Like that wasn't Mary choosing that. That was just kind of what happened to her. I guess she chose to go to Scotland instead of to just like retire to a convent in France. But so that's why I'm taking up just a 0.5, not a whole point. But I do think in terms of, and this is, later on, like next year, I'm planning to maybe revisit some of my earlier episodes where my scoring was a bit more chaotic to just like see what would I score them. Like Cleopatra, for instance, has like a weirdly low score.
The goat has an awful score.
Carolina Brunswick, yes.
Yes.
But because that was the first episode I ever did, and I didn't want to. Anyway,
I didn't know.
We didn't calibrate the scale for a while.
I will absolutely say that her choice to do a treason against Elizabeth was her that choice did change the world. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I agree. I'm not going to like try to change your score. I just want to point out that the doing of the treason, which was what got her killed, which was the first time a monarch was really known to be human and fallible and murderable by another monarch without the whole country rising against you, is significant.
It is. It definitely is. And 9.5 is where I think we will go. We know where she is in your heart. I think we would all.
There are people who agree with me.
Yeah. No, I think we would all have given her a 20 out of 10 for scheminess if we could have, but there has to be some rules. Okay. So the last category is the sexism bonus, and I'll tell you what Jennifer says first. So, because I think what I told her is I was just like, if she'd been a Catholic man with French connections, the asshole lords probably would have turned on that man as well. Like they were mad at her for being a woman, but if it had been a man, if Mary had been a man with all the same de Guise connections, they kidnapped James, like the asshole lords. It's like her being a woman was the low-hanging fruit that they could criticize her on, but there's other stuff as well. So, but then again, as a man, she'd have been so much more dangerous to Elizabeth and might have succeeded in usurping her. That's what I said. So I was like, Jennifer, what do you think? And then she says about sexism, it's so interesting to imagine what could have happened if she was a man. I know some of the recent writing on Mary really focuses on this aspect, but I actually think it was less important that she was female than that she was brought up in France. She just didn't understand the Scottish court and the Scottish lords. And you've talked about that, Lana. Like she was raised by Catherine de Medici, and like she was raised to think royal life was a certain way, and she got to Scotland and they're just like doing a whole other thing. Anyway.
And she was raised to be a de Guise, and that can work both ways in Scotland, obviously.
Yes. So she says, James the Sixth was kidnapped more than once as a baby and a child, but he was always in Scotland and learned how to deal with everyone. Mind you, James would never have ended up in a situation that Mary did with Bothwell because he was a man.
Well, James specifically might have.
Okay. Fair.
James might have.
Fair. They wouldn't have gotten married, though.
No.
He wouldn't have been legal.
They would have if he could have. If Mary of Guise had had a son, would she have sent him to the French court to stay safe? This is very tricky. Mary certainly commanded respect as a queen and was comfortable working in what might be considered a female way. For instance, manipulating Darnley when she had to after Rizzio's death. I don't know if she would have felt held back at all by being a woman. How would things have been if she had made a better marriage? 3 question marks. But who could she have married? And that's the thing. It's like Darnley kind of was the best option for her at the time. So many questions. Another high score. 8 again is what Jennifer says. And it is complicated. Like the intersection of her being a woman and a Catholic and the French stuff, specifically the de Guise stuff. Like there's a lot that people saw in her that they hated, but she was specifically like the sexism bonus. How I thought of it is just like, how much did the patriarchy hold her back? Like how much more could she have achieved if she was a man? And I do think if this was a man we were talking about, James, King of Scots, or what, like presumably would have been his name, the story would be very different because a male rival to Elizabeth would have gotten more support, I think. Probably.
And I think it's worth underlining how much like her life was held back and how much she suffered because of the fact that she was forced to marry people to get power. I mean, I don't want to undercount like the Bothwell alone sexism bonus. I want like that's a high.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's like not just that she was a woman, but that she lived in a patriarchal society where she had to marry somebody. Like if Elizabeth didn't, but that was complicated and different. Yeah.
Right. She could have been more like James and married somebody just, because that's what you do. I need someone who can bear a child and is not politically a problem for me. She needed someone who was politically a help. And that meant she had to look among these asshole schemers who were just the worst.
Yeah.
I want to turn this sideways a little bit because there's an aspect of if she was a man, how would things be different? But because she was a woman, what did the patriarchy specifically do to specifically harm her? And the entire Bothwell incident is the specific harm that women see from the patriarchy in the worst extreme. It's the forced marriage. It's the taking advantage of your illness or your weakness. It's spreading false rumors and basically like creating this illusion that you're a whore or that you do deviant sex acts, and somehow those deviant sex acts or having any sort of interest in sex other than specifically marriage, missionary position, happiness is something that is wrong with you and makes you less than. It's the fact that he was probably assaulting her on a regular basis during this time, and that is not a thing that has happened to most of the women in our stories and in the stories that Anne tells. Like Catherine de Medici was like actively doing the weirdest things in order to get pregnant and was going to the girlfriend to be like, how do you make this happen? She was not assaulted regularly. She was not kidnapped. She was not tortured at her weakest because she didn't have that. The patriarchy went out of their way to harm Mary as a human being. And that's just because even being a man, yes, that wouldn't have happened. But being a royal woman, that does not happen. And Mary very specifically had those kinds of things happen to her.
The patriarchy / sexism, whatever you want to call it, like really did harm her in these really real ways. Elizabeth never married, and she was able to make the sexism work. Like she played along with it. Like she was like, Elizabeth said stuff where it's like, I might look like a gross woman, but on the inside, I'm actually a cool man. Like she was able to be respected because she played along with it. She found ways to make the patriarchy and the sexism work for her. And Mary, I'm sure, tried, but like ultimately it's just like, but what are you going to do when a man decides to kidnap and assault you?
When you're having a health crisis.
Yeah.
And like probably postpartum depression and a lot of things that are very, very hard for a woman to deal with, and that they turn that into.
Yeah.
Like if it happens today, it would be some of the scariest things that could have it's revenge porn and all of that stuff, like all wrapped into one situation.
Yeah.
Like the patriarchy hurts us all. And that one situation though is kind of like an example of some of the worst things that that the patriarchy does to women.
Yeah, and that's very much what this category is for. It's just like, how much more could she have achieved if that wasn't the society in which she lived, if it wasn't patriarchal in this vile way?
One other thing I'll say, though, just like to Mary's extreme and eternal credit, is like, despite that, at no point in her life was she like, and I will now renounce my femininity and my sexuality and will try to like mold myself after some kind of male leader. Like I think Jennifer said in her note, like she had a very female kind of power and her charisma and her
Yes.
ability to like talk people around and bring them on their side. Like the people of Edinburgh were obsessed with her, not because she was a man, but because she was a woman. And she did use that in a way that I think is like really incredible given what she was up against. She still kind of leaned in knowing that that was her power. Her power was, how can I use outfits and charm and, the drama of me to make people wanna be with me and support my cause. Like, she did that shit.
She was strong. She was one of those people that figures out a way to survive no matter what. And if those things hadn't happened to her, she wouldn't have had to leave for England. Like she probably would have stayed and fought those asshole lords to her dying breath. But because she was a woman, that was possible, and she got the worst of it. But yeah, no, she like when she got to England, the story stops. And it doesn't stop at all. Like,
Yeah.
she just kept going and kept trying and never, ever gave up.
And that's the only reason that my heart doesn't wanna give her a 10 for sexism, not because what happened to her is not the most sexist thing that can happen, because it is. But if the category is how much did it stop her, I wanna, like, we talked about this through the whole season, like, it didn't, and the prevailing narrative is like, "Oh, poor Mary, who all these terrible things happened to because she was a woman and because people took advantage of her." Yes, she was a woman, yes, they did took advantage of her. She said, "Fuck you," and kept going, and I want, like, my heart wants this score to recognize that, not that, like, it would be a sign of her weakness if she hadn't kept going. Like, I don't want this to be a victim blamey category, but I wanna, like, it feels like it should note that, like, how much did sexism hold her back? Only as much as it did, and she fought every single step of the way to make sure that it didn't.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Yeah, I don't think it's a 0. But I agree it's not a 10 because
Yeah.
It's definitely not a 0.
Yeah.
it did hold her back, but it didn't stop her. And that's not like,
Yeah.
it's hard. I agree.
It's definitely above a 5, but it's not a 10.
No, if you're thinking about somebody like, when I think about who to give sexism points to, it's somebody like Sophia Dorothea, who her husband locked away in a house for 25 years because it seemed like she was maybe going to leave him. It's like, how much more could she have achieved? Like, we don't even know because she was just trapped away for so long. Or like that to me is a 10, where it's just like, she had no chance. Or if you think about a lower class woman who just had no other option,
Mary Toft is a 10 for sexism.
Yes, Mary Toft is perfect. That's a perfect example because it's just like she was so poor, she had no other. Can I read you just something? I think it's sort of related to this. So there's a listener to the show whose name is Miguel. He is our official South American liaison. He is part of the Patreon, and he leaves these very thoughtful comments after each episode. And just this one part I thought was really interesting because I love that he reclaims this. So he says, "My lasting thought is that crying is good because it releases tension and lets your emotions out. So Mary allowing herself to cry is probably what kept her alive for so long. She didn't bottle up all her feelings and negative thoughts. She let herself feel them, and then she got herself back together and continued to plot away." And I like the way he said that because there's so many stories where it's like Mary cried, like John Knox talked to her, she cried. It's like she was trapped, and it's often people see it as a negative thing, but I like the way that he described this, where it's like she feels it. And people are like, "Oh, look at her. She's so weak. She's crying." It's like, no, but that helps. That helps her get back on.
Yeah. She didn't stop. She cried, and then she's like, "Okay, what am I gonna do about that now?"
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I just like the way that he phrased that. So shout out to Miguel. So what do we think for the sex? I agree with everything, and it's so complicated because being a woman did affect her life in countless shitty ways. And also she found a way to use her feminine power. And I agree, Allison. That's I like the way that you describe that too. It's like she wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna be like Elizabeth. I'm gonna just like have helmet hair and like act like a man all the time. She's like, no, this is what I can do. This is what I'm good at. It's like manipulating people, being charming, like dancing, embroidery, like this is what I can do.
Even when I die, I'm gonna have an outfit change at my execution because fuck you.
Yeah. You're right. And it's a very feminine power.
I don't think she deserves to be like, what if she was a man? It's like, okay, so the patriarchy was working against her. How much more could she have achieved?
Yeah.
And she achieved a lot, but how much even more could she have achieved if there wasn't, let's say it wasn't a patriarchy, like how much more could she as herself achieved?
Well, and that's a huge question. It's like you hear that about people like, I forget who it is. It was, anyway, you hear about that people in the civil rights and stuff, where it's just like this person wanted to be a baseball player, but then like what society was like, they ended up, I think it was like Fred Hampton, ended up being like this civil rights leader. And it's like, well, if he hadn't had to do that, if society hadn't been so shitty that he had to step up, he would have just been like this happy baseball player. So like if Mary hadn't had to spend 90% of her time fending off the assholes, what could she have done? Like,
if Mary hadn't had to escape England, would Scotland be in charge of England now?
Yeah. it's all connected and it's all, I don't know. So what, like, are we at a 9?
What was the original suggestion? The one person who felt enough who was able to give a number.
The actual Scottish person, she says 8.
Allison, how do you feel about it?
I feel good about an 8.
I'm cool with an 8.
Okay. So
again, I just want to advocate for my girl.
Yeah. I mean, she deserves a 50 out of 40 in all of our hearts. We are all fully in agreement on that.
So this gets her, I'm going to double check my math. Just hang on. This is a very important number, and I want to make sure I get it right. So we have 8.5 for scandaliciousness, 10 for scheminess, 9.5 for significance, and an 8 for sexism is, I think, 37.5.
So it's half a point below Fredegun.
But I think I feel good about that because I knew this is why I wanted. Oh, wait. No, I think it's 36. Wait. 8.5 plus 10 plus 9.5 plus 8 is 36. Yeah.
Yeah, 36.
36. So that is, and here's what I'm going to say. Like, this scale is ridiculous, but, it's my scale and I stick to it. So Fredegan has a 38. And I mean, that's deserved, obviously. Mary's a 36. So that's the same as Njinga has a 36. I would say like a similarly powerful person with a similarly complex story of just like, because she was a woman, what? Because she was a,
And Hurrem Sultan.
Yeah, has a 36. I like that. Catherine de Medici, 35.5. Mary has 0.5 more than Catherine de Medici.
There's a lot of 35.5s. There's a whole, like...
It's interesting. Yeah. Well, it's interesting how, and they're all from different reasons. It's like some people are high in some places and other places. But no, this is why I want to have you on the show. Because I would just be like, Mary Queen of Scots, 10s across the board. But I really wanted to get into it and talk about it and be like objective and have a conversation and really feel confident about the number.
Allison tempers me well.
We have conflicting instincts, and I think we balance out to a good average. I think 36 feels really good for her.
Yeah, I like this for her, and I like who she's in the company of. Like, it's just people who are complex and interesting, and I don't want it to be like just because we did 10 episodes about her doesn't mean that she's necessarily more interesting than other people. It's just there's more stuff we know about her, and she's
well documented.
She's well documented, and she did 100 things every day of her life for 44 years. Like, there's other people where it's like, so for the next 10 years, we don't know what she did. But for Mary Queen of Scots, it's like, this day she did this. This day she did this. Like, it's, yeah.
There's plenty.
On Friday, she ate eggs.
On Saturday, she embroidered a rhinoceros.
I do want to say to anyone who's still listening to this incredibly long episode, so in the previous episodes, like last week to everybody, we played the interview with Claire Hunter. The week before, We were talking about the embroideries. And yeah, so I have the merch design, the cat, where Jan Jupiter, it destroys me. I love it so much. I ordered the cat design on a pillow case, and it arrived, and I put it on a pillow, and every time I see it, I've never been so happy with anything I've ever possessed in my life as this cat pillow. Hepburn, the actual cat, does not care about it. I think it just, it smells different. It doesn't smell like home yet, so we have to let it sit here for a while. But anyway, I just wanted to mention, I don't know, but if there's other Mary Queen of Scots merch ideas, please let me know. I'm sure there's many things we've said that would be catchy. I want both of you to be able to say where people can find you and follow you and see what you're up to. Do you want to go first, Lana?
You can find information about me and my books on lanawoodjohnson.com. And if you want to follow me on social media, I now actually active on Threads as muliebris, muliebris.
Threads, baby. Yeah. I don't know. It's been funny because I pre-record various episodes, and I'm just like, as each episode comes out, I'm just like, do I need to edit out where they say I'm on Twitter? Because I'm like, does Twitter still exist? I don't know. But now Threads exists.
I'm also very active on the Vulgar History Salon Discord channel, should you so choose to join us.
Oh, yes. I'll talk about that first, Allison, because you've all the news to say, various books and stuff to talk about. But I'll just talk about the Vulgar History Salon first. So Lana's also helps with the Vulgar History website and various technical aspects of things. And so she helped out when we decided it would be good to, as an extra perk for the people who are on the Patreon, who are at the $5 and up per month level, to have a way for people to talk to each other. Because it sort of already happens a bit in the comments on the Patreon posts, but it seems I love getting messages from the Tits Out Brigade, and I feel like a lot of you would like to get in touch with other ones of you. And so this is a way that so it's basically a big group chat. So if and when you join the Patreon, which you can do at patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter, if you're at the $5 or more per month level, you get the not free, you get the $5 per month access to the bonus episodes of Vulgar Piece Theater that I do with Allison and Lana. And also now the Vulgar History Salon, which is a place where we can talk about the episodes, but also talk about what TV shows we're watching and what historical fiction books we like, and share pictures of our pets and things like that. So it's a nice place to come and hang out. So I just want to let people know that that's there, and Lana is kind of the overseer of that. But I'm there too. So.
And what historical figure you're descended from?
Can I just say, so in the process of doing this series, I've heard from a listener who's descended from Janet Stewart, who was the sexy governess who went over with Mary to France and had the affair with the king. Like, she had children not from that affair. And so someone who is descended from her, someone who's descended from Mary Livingston from the Four Marys, someone who is descended from William Cecil, someone who's descended from Bess of Hardwick. And Allison, tell us about your coworker you just found out.
It's my professor in grad school who's a direct descendant from Sir Francis Walsingham, which fully blew my mind.
I love that it's like all the people in this story, the next generation, are now listening to this podcast. Lana is not descended from Mary Queen of Scots, but for the time being, that will be the role you have, like for now. You'll be the pretender as the heir to that.
The pretender to the throne.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm happily descended from Kenneth McAlpine.
And I like to imagine that
Galpin. I don't know how to say it.
I don't know. It varies, the Mac last names. But I like to think I'm descended from some cool Highland people that saw Mary once. That's what I choose to believe. So, Allison, tell everybody about all of your book news and how they can follow you and what you're up to.
Yes. All news about me and all things is on my website, AllisonEpstein.com. You can buy book number 1, A Tip for the Hangman, anywhere you buy books, mostly in North America. I'm sorry. Second book is called Let the Dead Bury the Dead. It's coming out in October, and I have a pre-order campaign going also on the website. Check that out. And then 3 days ago, as of recording this podcast, I got to announce that I am publishing a third book in 2025. It's called Our Rotten Hearts, and it's a retelling of Oliver Twist from Fagin's point of view, and it's the book of my heart, and I can't stop talking about it. So there's no action you can take on that yet because I still haven't finished writing it. But if you want to be excited with me.
And you can be excited with Allison on Instagram and also on Threads, right?
I'm trying. Honestly, by the time this episode comes out, just search Rapscallison on any social media platform. I may or may not be there, but if I am, that's what handle I'm using.
Yeah. And you can keep up with this podcast we're on Instagram and Threads. By the time this episode comes out, maybe Threads won't even exist anymore. Maybe it just existed for like 2 beautiful weeks.
Who knows?
Anyway, on Instagram and Threads at Vulgar History Pod. And then also I'm on TikTok at Vulgar History. And I have a Patreon, patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter, I mentioned before. So I mentioned the stuff that you get if you join at the $5 per month or more level. But if you join at the $1 per month or more level, you get early ad-free access to all episodes of Vulgar History and also my unending appreciation. And you can leave comments on the Patreon at those levels too, so we can chat and see what's up. And then also, somebody sent me a message the other day being like, I don't know if you take requests or suggestions. And I was like, oh, no, I do. Maybe I haven't said that on the podcast for a while. So if you have a person who you think would be good to talk about on the show, you can reach out to me on social media or also at vulgarhistorypod@gmail.com. And then also there's the website overseen by Lana Wood Johnson, vulgarhistory.com. Thank God. Like, Lana, honestly, thank God for you for setting this all up for me. It works beautifully. All the episodes are there. And then also we've been having transcripts recently. So they're done by Aveline Malik from The Wordery on recent episodes. So if you click open the episode, you'll see the transcript so you can read along. It's fun. Aveline is still getting used to it. She's just like, so in this episode, you said, she's like, how would you want to spell this nickname? And there's one point where she was just like, I'm not sure what you're saying. And what I was saying was Herman, my pills, which is, I'm like, okay, Aveline needs to know I'm going to say that a lot and how to spell that. Anyway, so that's all happening. I also have merch. If you go to vulgarhistory.com/store, you can see the merch store. There's like sales happen pretty often on there. I used to have a discount code, but now it's just like hang out for like a couple of days. There's constantly sales going on there. And I think that's everything. I have to say. Thank you all for listening. Oh, I will just say, like, this show is not over. This episode is over. But the series, this podcast, there's going to be episodes next week, and we're going to have some more Mary Queen of Scots content coming all month long, like going into September, basically. So there's always going to be something fun for you in your podcatcher app when you log in. Do you guys have any final thoughts about Mary Queen of Scots and this whole marathon that we've all experienced? Telling the story over the length of, frankly, a pretty long audiobook at this point.
It's been a joy all the way through. Thank you for letting me talk to you about my girl Mary for like fully, I think 14 hours at this point is well worth it.
Thank you for kindly understanding my favorite. So now we can like nerd about this randomly forever.
Yeah, I know. Lana, I was just like, are your final thoughts just Lana at the window being like, heh, yes.
I was right. I told you so, especially the Douglases. Obviously, now you have to listen to me all the time.
Yeah, and it's true. But also, I love all the people who have listened to this, and now we're changing people's understanding of Mary Queen of Scots and who she was. Like, people send me messages. They're like, wow, I didn't know that she was actually cool and interesting. I'm like, a lot of people don't know that. So I'm glad that now people do. Anyway, thank you both so much. I'm never gonna not be the person who's like, this will just be an hour, and it ends up being 2 hours and 45 minutes. But thank you both for spending this time with me.
I should have known with us, it's never going to be short.
No, especially like the 3 of us all together.
Fool me once, humor me, but like you fooled me about 17 times, and I fall for it every time.
Oh, this is why I came up with the games. I was like, I need to make sure this episode isn't too short.
Lord.
Thank you both for joining me, everybody. Pants on, tits out. I'll talk to you next week, listeners. Thank you all. Vulgar History is hosted, written, and researched by Ann Foster and edited by Christina Lumagi.
Welcome to the small town of Chinook, where faith runs deep and secrets run deeper. In this new thriller, religion and crime collide when a gruesome murder rocks the isolated Montana community. Everyone is quick to point their fingers at a drug-addicted teenager, but local deputy Ruth Vogel isn't convinced. She suspects connections to a powerful religious group. Enter federal agent V.B. Lauro, who has been investigating a local church for possible criminal activity. The pair form an unlikely partnership to catch the killer, unearthing secrets that leave Ruth torn between her duty to the law, her religious convictions, and her very own family. But something more sinister than murder is afoot, and someone is watching Ruth.
Chinook, starring Kelly Marie Tran and Sanaa Lathan. Listen to Chinook wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, a founder of the Go Kid Go network. At Go Kid Go, putting kids first is at the heart of every show that we produce. That's why we're so excited to introduce a brand new show to our network called The Search for the Silver Lining, a fantasy adventure series about a spirited young girl named Isla who time travels to the mythical land of Camelot. Look for The Search for the Silver Lining on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.